Chapter 194. He Yen slept very late that night at the Shao family's residence. This was not the Liang province guard, and there was a middle door between the rooms. He Yen was even more nervous now that he knew Xiao Ju was next door. She didn't know if it was just her imagination, but she felt that Xiao Ju was treating her much more gently now. To Xiao Ju, it might be a small matter, but to her, it could easily stir up the deepest and most secret emotions in her heart. He Yen turned over, but her current status was special. Once she returned to Shuajing, everything related to Su Zhiheng and He Rufei was right in front of her. No matter who she was with, she would be a burden. Xiao Ju already had a deep grudge against the Shao family. If she implicated him. He Yen took a deep breath and looked at the curtain above her head. This was not a good idea. Her mind was filled with all kinds of complicated thoughts. She only fell asleep in the middle of the night. When she woke up the next day, it was already late in the morning. She was stunned for a moment, then turned over and sat up. She changed her clothes and opened the door. Sitting on the steps facing the courtyard was a little servant girl around 8 or 9 years old. She was chubby and was holding her face as she carefully looked at the ants in the corner. When she heard movement, she raised her head, revealing a round face like that of a doll in a New Year painting. She smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into slits. He Gongzi is awake. She patted the dust off her clothes, stood up, and jogged over to He Yen. This child was still too young. With her short legs, He Yen was afraid that she would fall. He Yen asked, "You are?" "This servant is called Bai Guo," the little servant girl replied obediently. "Second young master told this servant to take care of you. However, if Gongzi didn't call for me, I couldn't enter Gongzi's room. Since Gongzi is awake, this servant will go to the kitchen and bring breakfast over." Her voice was so soft that He Yen couldn't help but pat her head and ask, "Where's your family's second young master?" "Second young master left early in the morning," Bai Guo answered with a smile. Before second young master left, he said that young master didn't need to be restrained. If you didn't want to stay in the Fu, you could leave the Fu to do things and come back early at night. She thought of something and added, "There are banknotes in the wooden drawer on the table in young master's room. Second young master said that young master can take it and use it. If there's anything else that young master needs, young master can directly tell this servant. This servant will report to young mistress." This little girl still had an irrepressible childishness, but her words were clear and logical. He Yen couldn't help laughing. "You're so young, how could your family's second young master let you serve me? Nubi's father is the steward of the Fu." Bai Guo puffed out her chest proudly. "Second young master sent Nubi over. Nubi will definitely take good care of young master." "Thank you very much," He Yen said with a smile. Bai Guo was very excited. It seemed that this was the first time she had received such an important task. She replied, "Young master is second young master's friend, there's no need to thank Nubi. Nubi will go to the kitchen now. Young master, please wait a moment. The hot water is in the silver kettle at the door of the courtyard. If young master wants to wash your face, you can pour it directly. Second young master said that young master doesn't like to be touched by people. Nubi doesn't need to do such a small thing as pouring water." She stuck out her tongue and ran away. He Yen looked at her back and thought, Xiao Ju was very thoughtful. She found such a simple and pure little girl. Even if she saw that there was something wrong with her, she wouldn't think of anything else. What if it was a smart person who came over and accidentally discovered her identity? What would she do then? She lowered her head and laughed. First, she went to the place Bai Guo mentioned to fetch water and returned to the room to freshen up. Just as she finished, Bai Guo came in with a food basket. She stepped over the threshold and put the food basket on the table. "Young master, after you finish eating, just leave the food basket here. Nubi will clean it up. Nubi will come in again if you need anything." Before He Yen could say anything, she immediately left. He Yen was speechless. He really didn't know what Xiao Ju said to her. The food was plain porridge and side dishes, just like last night. It wasn't extravagant, but it was exquisite and meticulous. He Yen finished the food and put the empty plates into the food basket. He tidied his clothes and walked to the table. He thought of what Bai Guo said and opened the wooden drawer. Sure enough, there was a thick stack of banknotes inside. He thought that Bai Guo would at most have 1 or 2 banknotes. He didn't expect Xiao Ju to be so generous. This amount of banknotes was enough to give the girl a betrothal gift. Evil aristocratic children, He Yen thought angrily. No wonder when Xiao Ju went to buy clothes in Jiang, he bought 100 taels of mermaid gauze without batting an eye. With money, one could really do whatever they wanted. He Yen didn't touch the banknotes inside. Instead, he closed the wooden drawer and walked out of the room. She had a good memory and knew how to walk from this courtyard to the entrance of Xiao Mansion. She didn't meet Bai Rongwei or Xiao Jing along the way. As for the rest of the servants, she didn't know if Xiao Ju greeted them in advance, but none of them paid attention to her. They only focused on their own tasks. It was as if He Yan's appearance in the Xiao family was a very natural thing. It was as if she had lived in the Xiao family since a long time ago and was a member of the Xiao family. He Yan walked out of Xiao Mansion's main door without much effort. As soon as he walked out, he saw the bright sunlight. He Yan narrowed his eyes and walked in a certain direction. Before she left the capital to join the army, she had already won a large sum of money at Lutong village. He Yunxing went to school. Now, a year and a half had passed. She didn't know if He Yunxing was still studying at that school. It wasn't good for her to go directly to the He family. After all, the neighbors had watched Lady He grow up. Even if she dressed as a man, she might be recognized. He Yunxing's classmates at school had never seen He Yan before. It was probably safer. At this moment, the time was just right. He Yan didn't spend much effort and arrived at the entrance of Hello Academy. Hello Academy couldn't be compared to Xian Changguan, but it was still considered a good school for ordinary people. In the way, where scholars were more important than martial arts, Yuelu Academy not only taught literature, but also had teachers to teach martial arts. This was something that He Yan valued the most. He Yunxing was a bit late in learning. He wasn't interested in learning, but his martial arts were quite good. If he wanted to walk the path of a martial artist in the future, it wasn't impossible. It was early in the morning, the best time to study. Sounds of people reading came from Yuelu Academy. He Yan wasn't a member of the academy, so it wasn't good for him to go in directly. He ordered a cup of tea from a tea house outside and sat for about an hour. When it was time for school to end, he took advantage of the time when the teachers were leaving to climb over the wall and enter the academy. From time to time, students would leave the academy. He Yan wanted to find a teenager and ask He Yunxing where he was. Unknowingly, he had already walked to the window of the school. The laughter of the teenagers came from inside. There was a bit of malicious ridicule. "Brother Yunxing, are you really not coming with us today? Today is Brother Wang's birthday." Another person said, "How could Brother Yunxing look down on us? Look at us playing together. When have we ever seen Brother Yunxing come with us? Brother Yunxing is so good in martial arts. His face is charming. Girls like him. Maybe he can get married in the future and have a meteoric rise. Why would he hang out with us?" There was another wave of laughter. He Yan frowned slightly. This kind of ridicule was too hurtful. He Yunxing was a proud and impatient person. How could he stand this? They wouldn't fight, right? She was worried. She sneaked a peek inside and saw a teenager in green standing in front of the table. He was tidying up the table with his head lowered. From beginning to end, he didn't say a word. He actually endured this kind of humiliation. He probably felt like he was punching cotton. There was no sound at all. The teenagers messed around for a while and felt bored. They left the school in 2s and 3s. At the same time, He Yunxing tidied up the table and got up to leave. He Yan followed He Yunxing from a distance. He Yunxing entered an empty alley. He had only taken a few steps when he suddenly felt a strong wind behind him. He subconsciously turned around and struck back with his palm. That palm didn't hit anyone. Instead, it hit another soft but tough palm. It silently blocked the wind from his palm and easily made him retreat a few steps. "Who is it?" he shouted vigilantly. The next moment, a familiar voice with a smile sounded. "Good boy. It seems that the year of school training wasn't in vain. You've grown a lot stronger." Hearing this voice, Yunqing was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. The palm in front of him moved away, revealing the person's face. A face that was similar to his would appear in his mind every now and then. It was a beautiful and elegant face that was familiar yet unfamiliar at the same time. His older sister. Yan. "You." Yunqing's voice trembled. Yan slapped his head and rubbed it. "What about you? Call me older sister. Why are you back?" Yunqing seemed to have finally regained his senses. He rubbed his eyes. It was at this moment that Yan saw a little of the boy he used to see. He stepped forward and grabbed Yan's elbows as if to confirm whether he was dreaming or reality. "You're really back? Yan. When did you come back? Do you know that Dad and I have been worried to death this year?" His eyes were red and his voice was choked with sobs. Yan looked at the boy in front of her and couldn't help but sigh. The boy grew quickly. Yunqing was much taller than before after a year and a half. Now, she had to look up at him. He was also much thinner than before. He looked tall and straight, as if he was already an adult. Yan pulled him out. "This is not the place to talk. Come with me." In the tea room, exquisite pastries were placed in front of him. Yunqing had no intention of eating them. The person in front of him pushed the plate in front of him. "Don't you like to eat these? Eat more." Yunqing straightened his neck and said, "I don't like sweets." Yan rolled her eyes in her heart. She wondered who was the one who drooled over the pastries Sui gave her when they were chopping firewood in the mountains. She looked at the boy in front of her. The child had grown up and knew how to protect his own self-esteem. It was strange. She had met Qing Lisu and Song Tao Tao, who were all younger than her. However, she always had an inexplicable concern for Yunqing. This concern was well hidden when she was in Liangzhou. Once she saw Yunqing, she couldn't suppress it. She just wanted to give the best to this child and hope that he would be well in the future. Perhaps it was because this body was Lady He's. This was the wonder of blood ties. "You still haven't told me why you came back." Yunqing stared at Yan and hesitated. "Also, why do you look like this now?" Yan looked at him with a smile. "This. Isn't this good?" Yunqing didn't say it was bad or good. He just felt that it was strange. He was used to seeing Yan in dresses. He had also seen her in men's clothes once. However, even then, she didn't look as natural as she did now. If Yan wasn't his sister, Yunqing would never believe that this person was a woman if he saw her on the street. Yan was quite beautiful. Even when Yunqing had a bad relationship in the past, he couldn't admit this fact. However, her beauty always seemed a little frivolous and cheap, especially when she tried every possible way to get Sui's money to buy clothes and accessories for herself. Yan was a little darker than before. She didn't wear any makeup. Instead of saying that she was beautiful, it was better to say that she was heroic. That bright light made her eyes as bright as the stars. Actually, she was also beautiful. In fact, she was even more attractive than before. However, this wasn't the main point. Yunqing came back to his senses and said, "Are you still in the barracks?" "No, if you were still in the barracks, how could you run out? Your sister is very capable. My superior appreciates me." Yan picked up her tea and took a sip. "When I joined the army, I was lucky enough to be appointed a small official. Now, I can't be compared to the top, but I can be compared to the bottom." "How could you be appointed an official?" He Yunsheng was shocked. Don't you know that you are a woman? Even if you can hide it for a while, you can't hide it forever. If your identity is discovered in the future, you will be finished. No, no, He Yunsheng was anxious. Hurry up and resign. Resign tomorrow. He Yen tilted her head and looked at him. Aren't you going to ask me what official position I was appointed to? No matter what official position it is, you can't stay. He Yunsheng said impatiently, even if you are the Prime Minister, you can't stay. Besides, the higher your position, the more dangerous it is. Even if it's for glory and wealth, you can't put your life on the line. You must resign. He Yen was startled. For a moment, she was in a daze. He Yunsheng, a child, could understand the logic. How could the two old masters of the He family, who were officials in the imperial court, not understand? This was clearly an extremely dangerous thing to do. Once it was discovered, she would die. But the He family still let her do it, and they did it for so many years. So it was just that, human nature was greedy and they couldn't bear to part with that bit of glory and wealth. Or perhaps, in their eyes, He Yan's life was just a bargaining chip that wasn't worth a single cent compared to the glory of their future. Hey, are you listening to me? He Yunsheng waved his hand in front of her. He Yan raised his head and smiled. Of course I know what you're talking about. I must resign, but now is not the time. I still have some things to do. When I finish, I will resign. He Yunsheng was about to ask her what she wanted to do, but He Yen suddenly opened her mouth again. She asked, let's not talk about me. What about you guys? When I wasn't in Shuajing, how was father? Did the Fan family come looking for trouble? He Yunsheng's expression darkened. Those bastards. How could they not come looking for trouble? It turned out that after He Yen joined the army, Fan Cheng's murderer was never found. The Fan family vented their anger on the He family. Although He Yen was also a victim, because He Yan's body was never found, there was no evidence. Fan Cheng's family often found trouble with He Sui in the field. They slandered He Sui for not doing things properly, causing He Sui to lose his position as a field officer. Fortunately, not long after that, there was a merchant in Shuajing who wanted to hire a bodyguard. When they found out that He Sui was a field officer and had good skills, they asked He Sui to work for them. Although it didn't sound as good as being a field officer, the merchant was generous and gave him a lot of money. He Yen was a little suspicious. You have a lot of money, but aren't you wearing old clothes? From the words of your classmates, it's clear that they dislike you for not being willing to spend money with them. He Yunsheng looked at her in disbelief. You actually eavesdropped. Shoo, He Yen smiled. I was just passing by and happened to hear it. You kept the money and didn't use it. Could it be that you saved it as a betrothal gift? He Yunsheng didn't say anything. He couldn't tell He Yen that although his family had a lot of money, he had discussed it with He Sui. They didn't know when He Yen would come back after joining the army. As a girl, he didn't know how much hardship she had suffered outside. It was good enough that she was still alive. If she was old when she came back, or if she was disliked by others, she would not marry and save more money. In the future, if He Yen wanted to live alone in Shuajing, having more money would not be a bad thing. Seeing that He Yunsheng didn't say anything, He Yen thought that he had guessed correctly. She smiled and said, don't be so thrifty. I'm a person with a salary now. She took out 2 banknotes from her bosom and said in a low voice, we won the battle earlier. These are the spoils of war, His Majesty's reward. Take this money, go back and make 2 new clothes for father and yourself. Treat yourself better. Clothes make a man, and a horse makes a saddle. If you dress up well, the girl you like will like you, right? Young girls like handsome men. Although you have a handsome face, you don't have a good personality. You need to dress up. He Yunsheng held the banknotes in his hand. After a while, he asked, you won the battle. Did you go to the battlefield? Which battle? The battle at Jiang, the battle at Liangzhou, or the battle at the Rundu? He Yen didn't expect him to care about these things. She scratched her head and said, "Actually, I went to all these battles." He Yunxing sucked in a breath of cold air. He Yan left in a hurry and only left a letter behind. He Yunxing later asked around and found out that the batch of soldiers recruited by Shua capital all went to the Liangzhou Guard. After that, he always paid attention to news about the Liangzhou Guard. He heard that the journey was long and many weak people died on the way. He prayed every day, hoping that his mother in heaven would protect He Yan and keep him safe. He also heard that the Liangzhou Guard suffered from the cold and worked hard to train the soldiers. He only hoped that He Yan could be the head soldier. When Rida Musi led the soldiers to the Liangzhou Guard, he and He Sui couldn't sleep for the whole night. Later, they comforted each other that He Yan would be fine. She couldn't even carry a saber and was smart. She might not even see the enemy. The battle at Jiang, the battle at Rundu. In short, He Sui and He Yunxing had a hard time ever since He Yan joined the army. If they weren't afraid that the Fan family would find He Yan's whereabouts, they would have packed their bags and rushed to Liangzhou personally. "Didn't I ask someone to send you a message?" He Yan asked. He Yunxing frowned and thought for a while, then said, "There were 2 messages, but they were very short. Also, they were written on a note and threw it into the house. I didn't get to meet them, so I don't know about your situation." He Yunxing was angry and anxious when he said this. "What were you thinking at that time? Why did you want to join the army? You're a girl." "No one said that girls can't join the army." He Yan was afraid of his nagging, so she cut him off. "Besides, don't you see that I'm safe and sound now? By the way, Father is no longer a lieutenant. Is the Fan family still harassing you?" He Yunxing shook his head. "A few months ago, the Fan family stopped coming." He said sarcastically, "We can accept their beating and scolding. They probably know that it's meaningless to continue like this. I heard that the Fan family's old master has another son, so they probably don't care about the previous one." He Yan couldn't help but be speechless. The Fan family's old master could still have a son at such an old age. He really didn't know what to say. "Come back with me." He Yunxing looked at He Yan. "Father will be home tonight. When you come back, he'll be very happy to see you." He Yan shook his head. "I can't go back now." "Why?" "Yunxing." He Yan looked at him patiently. "My identity is very delicate now. Everyone in the neighborhood has seen my face. If I'm recognized, there will be trouble. Even if I want to meet Father, it won't be at home. Moreover, now is not a good time." She stuffed the banknotes into He Yunxing's hands. "I came here today to see you. I'm relieved to see that you're doing well. Go back and tell Father that I'm fine. We'll find a place to meet again in a few days." He Yunxing felt a little wronged. It wasn't easy to see him, but he had to hide as if he couldn't be seen. However, he knew in his heart that He Yan was right. "Then what about you?" He stuffed the banknotes back into He Yan's hands. "Don't you need to use the banknotes yourself? You can take them yourself. Also, where are you staying now? An inn? Inns are not safe. I heard that there are many unscrupulous shops." He Yan couldn't be bothered to push the banknotes back and forth. She stuffed the banknotes into his arms and said, "I still have a lot of them. It's a thick stack. You can use them whenever you want. You don't have to worry about it. I'm not staying in an inn now. I've asked someone to look for a house to rent. Before that, I'll be staying at a friend's house." "Friend?" He Yunxing's ears perked up. He looked at her vigilantly and impatiently asked, "What friend? Did you meet him at the Liang Province Guards? How old is he? Is he a man or a woman?" He Yan was speechless. Why did he look like a father who wanted his daughter to stay the night outside? She thought that if she said Xiao Ju's name, He Yunxing would probably follow her back to the Xiao residence tonight. After all, He Yunxing's words were still fresh in He Yan's mind. "If I were a woman, would only love him." He Yan's mouth twitched. For a moment, she couldn't imagine He Yunsheng and Xiao Ju standing together. After a while, she said, "Why do you care so much? Anyway, he's a big shot." Chapter 195. With great difficulty, she managed to brush him off. In the end, He Yan stuffed 2 banknotes into He Yunsheng's hands. She then carefully warned him that other than He Sui, He Yunsheng was not to say anything about seeing her. He Yunsheng said impatiently, "Of course I know, but you." He looked at He Yan, "You won't disappear again, right?" That day when they were on the boat, Fan Cheng had met with an accident. He Yan disguised herself as an assassin and left. She had also said to He Yunsheng, "We will definitely meet again." But not long after, she joined the army. He Yan sighed in his heart. This child, she was about to leave a shadow in his heart. She stood on her tiptoes and patted He Yunsheng's head. He Yunsheng moved his head away and smiled, "Don't worry, I am now an official in the capital. Don't worry, I will come to see you in a few days. You should focus on your studies. As a younger brother, you can't be less successful than me, your older sister." He Yunsheng's face sank and said, "How is that possible?" He thought that He Yan was going to mock him, but instead, he saw the girl dressed as a teenager looking at him with a smile. Her voice was gentle, "I know, our Yunsheng is the most powerful." He Yunsheng's face turned red and he muttered in a low voice, "Do I need you to tell me that?" After sending He Yunsheng to the alley, He Yan lowered the curtain hat on her head, turned around, and walked out. There was no harm in being vigilant in everything. They parted ways. He Yan walked down the street, thinking about what happened when she saw He Yunsheng. After that, Fan Cheng was still looking for trouble with He Sui. Although he had stopped for a few days, who knew if he would do the same thing again in the future? Although her official position could put pressure on the Fan family, Lady He would come to the Fan family's door every few days to cry. Everyone in the Fan family recognized her face. She was afraid that it would be inappropriate to rashly expose her identity. He had to think about it from a long-term perspective. But what was gratifying was that He Yunsheng had really grown up. He Yan smiled when he thought of this. This young man now had the bearing of a man. When faced with the crowd's taunts and mockery, he didn't immediately hit back like before. He knew how to be patient. It was a heart-wrenching and gratifying growth. While he was thinking, he had unknowingly walked to the door of the Xiao family. It was already afternoon. When the manservant at the door saw He Yan, he greeted him with a smile, "Young Master He," and then stepped aside to open the door. He Yan's heart warmed slightly. The people of the Xiao family were very friendly to him. He Yan walked towards the courtyard. She didn't know if Xiao Ju was back yet. If he was, she wanted to talk to him about what happened next. Unexpectedly, as soon as he reached the corridor, he ran into Bai Rongwei, who was giving orders to the servants. He Yan had a good impression of Mrs. Xiao. She was gentle and considerate, and she was good at taking care of others' feelings. Seeing He Yan, Bai Rongwei was stunned for a moment. Then, she smiled and said, "Young Master He." He Yan nodded at her. "Madam, Huijin hasn't returned to the Fu yet." Bai Rongwei asked He Yan, "Young Master He, have you eaten? If you haven't, what do you want to eat? I'll ask the kitchen to make some food and send it to your room." "There's no need to trouble yourself," He Yan quickly replied. "I've already eaten outside." He Yunsheng had eaten some snacks in the tea house. Although it wasn't as exquisite as the food in the restaurant, it wasn't bad. He Yunsheng rarely ate outside. At first, he was a bit hesitant, but later on, he ate happily. Bai Rongwei smiled and said, "If that's the case, then let's wait until later." She looked at He Yan. "Young Master He is the first friend that Huijin brought back. It seems that you took good care of Huijin when you were in Liangzhou." No, it was the governor who took care of me." He Yan blushed. "Huijin rarely opens his heart to others. He must have treated you like this because young master He deserves a sincere friendship." Bai Rongwei sighed. He usually doesn't like to express himself. If he does something wrong, I'll have to trouble young Master He to forgive him. This child has a good heart, but he always acts like he's unreasonable. The governor is a very good person. He Yen smiled. Everyone knows that. Bai Rongwei saw that she wasn't being perfunctory and sighed in relief. That's good. He's always been alone. There's no girl by his side who cares about him. At this point, Bai Rongwei seemed to have thought of something. She asked He Yen, "Oh right, young Master He, you're close to Huijin. Do you know why he's angry with Miss Shen?" "Miss Shen?" He Yen asked. "Shen Mushue." Bai Rongwei nodded. "What happened between the two of them? When you returned to the capital this time, Miss Shen didn't come with you. I heard that it was because Huijin was rushing to the Rundu. He didn't want Miss Shen to be tired from the long journey. However, Miss Shen already returned to the capital a few days ago, but the two of them didn't meet. If it was any other time, Miss Shen would have come to the Fu." Seeing that He Yen was lost in thought, Bai Rongwei explained, "Young Master He probably already knows about the relationship between the Shen family and our Fu. When father was in trouble, only Uncle Shen was willing to speak up for the Shao family. Miss Shen liked Huijin when she was young. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Even though Huijin treated Miss Shen coldly in the past, he still took care of her because of Uncle Shen. Later, Miss Shen secretly went behind Uncle Shen's back to where Huijin was leading the troops. At that time, the war was chaotic and it wasn't safe to send her back. Thus, Miss Shen stayed on the battlefield and learned medicine. She has been helping Huijin since then. Uncle Shen couldn't do anything about his daughter. He could only ask Huijin to help take care of her. Huijin accepted Uncle Shen's kindness and protected Miss Shen's safety on the battlefield. He Yen already knew that Shen Mushue went to the battlefield for Shaoju, but he didn't know the details. Now that he heard Bai Rongwei's explanation, he couldn't help but feel bitter. Shen Mushue's actions were very brave and affectionate. Just like what Liang Ping and the others said that day at the martial arts practice field, as long as one was a man, they would be moved and feel pity for her. She heard her own voice ask softly, hiding all her emotions, "Does Furen want the two of them to be together? How could that be?" Bai Rongwei was slightly stunned, then laughed. "Ruby and I had this idea before, but then we saw that Huijin really didn't have any feelings for Miss Shen, so we gave up. Young Master He, you're close to Huijin. You should know that with Huijin's personality, no one can force him to do anything, let alone marry. Since he didn't have any feelings for her, we naturally couldn't force him. Otherwise, not only would we hurt Huijin, but we would also hurt Miss Shen." He Yen heard this and was somewhat suspicious. He only asked Bai Rongwei, "I don't quite understand what Furen means. Even if they can't be husband and wife, they're still friends. Miss Shen didn't want to visit, so it's obvious that they had a conflict over something. But Huijin isn't a petty person, and Miss Shen isn't an unreasonable girl. After thinking about it, there's only one possibility." She looked at He Yen, her eyes sparkling. There was a trace of expectation in her usually gentle expression. He Yen looked at her, puzzled. "Does Huijin have a girl he likes?" He Yen, huh? Bai Rongwei continued, "If Huijin has a girl he likes, then everything makes sense. Only this would truly hurt Miss Shen's heart, and she wouldn't even be willing to visit. Young Master He, have you seen anyone in Huijin's heart?" He Yen. "I don't think so." "How can that be?" Bai Rongwei was slightly disappointed, but she quickly continued to ask, "Then is there any girl in the Liangzhou Guard who's close to Huijin?" "Other than Miss Shen, there aren't any other girls in the Liangzhou Guard." He Yen abruptly stopped speaking. Actually, there was a girl in the Liangzhou Guard who was close to Shaoju. Wasn't that her? But Shaoju liked him, and she even had a conflict with Shen Mushue because of him. It sounded unimaginable. Bai Rongwei sighed. If that's the case, then it's really worrying. Seeing He Yen looking at her, Bai Rongwei smiled bitterly. Huijin should have gotten married a long time ago at his age. But he doesn't even have a girl he likes, let alone a wife. Ruby and I are both worried. Even if his classmates in the Xianchang Pavilion aren't married, they're all engaged. Although young Master Lin isn't engaged either, he has dealings with girls, so it shouldn't be difficult for him to get married. Huijin. He Yan couldn't help but speak up for Xiaoju. If the commander-in-chief wants to get married, it shouldn't be difficult. Bai Rongwei glanced at him and smiled. It really isn't difficult. Everyone else wants to marry a girl, and the matchmaker comes knocking on their door. Our family wants to get married, and the matchmaker fills the courtyard with gifts. But what's the use? No matter how many girls like him, no matter how good they are, he won't look at them. If it weren't for the banquets we hold every time we return to the capital, I'm afraid he would have left in a huff. He Yen. She didn't know what to say, so she could only squeeze out a smile. Speaking of which, it's almost time to hold the banquet. Bai Rongwei looked at He Yen and smiled. Young master, he should come too. I heard that young master is a few years younger than Huijin. You're young and promising, and you're born with an extraordinary appearance. If there's a girl you like at the banquet, then you'll have a good marriage. She was thinking wholeheartedly for He Yen. He Yen was about to cry when he heard this. He thought, how come it's one thing to be heard in the Yangzhou guards, but it's still unavoidable when we return to the capital? What, is her heart that has been tempered thousands of times not afraid of being burned? He Yen forced a smile and said, we'll talk about it when the time comes. I'm also a bit busy these days. Bai Rongwei nodded. Young master, he should be busy with his own matters. You don't have to take it to heart. I'm just saying it casually. He Yen was afraid that if he continued to talk with Bai Rongwei, she would say something heart-wrenching. He hurriedly found an excuse to return to the courtyard. He hurriedly bowed to her and returned to his own room. When he returned to his room, he closed the door. He Yen sat in front of the table and looked at the flowers and grass in the courtyard outside the window. He punched the table and pretended to be angry. Outrageous. If someone came to let her see Xiaoju and other girls, she would simply tell the world that she was a homosexual and had improper thoughts about Xiaoju. Let's see if they would still let her do such a good thing. At the same time, in a restaurant somewhere in the capital, someone was sitting in a private room. Fei Nu and Qi Wu stood at the door. Not long after, someone came in from outside. It was a woman wearing a guard's uniform. She was around 30 years old and was very beautiful. However, her long hair was tied up in a high bun. Her eyes were cold and sharp, making her seem somewhat unapproachable. She strode into the private room without looking at Qi Wu and Fei Nu. She only bowed to Xiaoju and said, "Young master." Wanning. Xiaoju looked at her. Is there any news about Hirufei? The woman called Wanning respectfully said, regarding Hirufei's previous deeds, this subordinate has already written a letter to Qi Wu to bring it to young master. In the past few days, there have been new discoveries. Ever since Hirufei was conferred the title of general, apart from this battle in Huayuan, he has never left the capital. Moreover, the officials that he has good relations with in the court are mostly civil officials. Civil officials. Xiaoju bent his finger and tapped the teacup in front of him. He lightly said, does he have any girls that he is familiar with? Wanning was startled. She immediately replied, not yet. Hirufei has now reached the age of marriage. I heard that first madam he is currently looking for a suitable wife for him. However, Hirufei himself doesn't seem to be close to women. Other than his second cousin, he rarely interacts with women. Second cousin. He Yuanliang's second legitimate daughter. He Xining is now the new wife of Hanlin scholar Su Zhiheng. Wanning replied. Xiaoju lowered his eyes and looked at the teacup in front of him. After a while, he asked, what is the relationship between Hirufei and the previous first Madame Su? The previous first Madame Su. Wanning was confused for a moment. After a while, she said, it seems not bad. The previous first Madame Su's health wasn't good. Before she got married, she had been recuperating in the manor. Although there is no evidence that they were close, after First Madame Sue's death, Hirufei personally took care of her funeral. The funeral lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. It can be seen how close they were. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. That might not be the case. It really was a close sibling relationship. Hirufei should have stopped He Xining from marrying Su Zhiheng as a second wife. To his younger sister who had died young, this matter definitely couldn't be considered a consolation, but an insult. However, Hirufei wouldn't be surprised no matter what he did now. This was because the current General Feihong wasn't Hirufei at all. The real Hirufei might have died before becoming a general, or he might not have died yet. However, the He family definitely wouldn't allow a woman to occupy the glory, splendor, and wealth that was prepared for Hirufei. Therefore, the current Hirufei had appeared. However, what he didn't understand was that in this matter, Hirufei had become a vested interest and the He family had become a community of interests. However, what about that woman, Hirufei? What made her willingly wear a mask and use Hirufei's name to fight for meritorious service? Did she have a crush on Hirufei? That was also possible. However, even if she did have a crush on him, she had persisted for too long. The real Hirufei was foolish and stubborn. However, the current Hirufei was a smart person who was willing to let all of his trusted subordinates die in battle in order to not let the news leak out. It could be imagined that the original Hirufei had most likely met with misfortune after the rabbit was killed and the dog was cooked. Go spread the news, Xiao Ju said. During the Battle of Huayuan, Hirufei's ability to control the enemy retreated 1,000 miles in a single night. He's like a completely different person from before. After this, you must closely monitor Hirufei. Who he meets, what he does, don't miss a single thing. Warning, yes. Xiao Ju picked up his teacup and took a sip. Then he looked at her. What about the other matter? How is your investigation going? Wan Ying's expression turned cold. This subordinate was just about to report this matter to young master. In the village outside the city, there seemed to be soldiers who were lucky enough to survive the Battle of Mingshui. However, they hid very well. Prime Minister Su's people are also looking for their whereabouts. Previously, we found one, but he refused to believe us. He didn't wait to see us and jumped into a well to commit suicide. Xiao Ju's hand paused. He put down the teacup and lowered his eyes. You continue to search for the remaining people. Be careful not to be discovered by Su Jingfu's people. After you find them, immediately inform me. He tilted his head, his expression very calm. I'll go see them myself. Late at night. The sound of the door opening came from next door. He Yan, who was sitting at the table, felt his heart skip a beat. He stood up and opened the door. Sure enough, he saw Xiao Ju in front of the door next door. She called out, Commander-in-Chief. Then she ran over. Xiao Ju looked down at her and asked, Why aren't you sleeping yet? He Yan blurted out, I'm waiting for you. Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows slightly. I'm not Yan He. After saying this, he walked in unhurriedly. He Yan followed behind like a tail. After 2 steps, he came back to his senses. What did he mean by that? In a split second, his face became hot. Qi Wu and Fei Nu didn't follow in. He Yan helped him close the door. Xiao Ju wasn't used to being served by others. There were no servants or maids in the room. At this moment, he leaned against the wall. He poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to He Yan. Thank you. He Yan took the tea. He didn't want to drink it. He held the tea and asked, Commander-in-Chief, I came to ask you something. When will you bring me to the palace? Xiao Ju unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his brocade robe and said casually, What do you want to do in the palace? Our Rundu won the battle. Jiang won the battle. Previously, we also won the battle in the Yangzhou Guards. His Majesty will definitely reward us in person. Moreover, it's almost the Mid-Autumn Festival. There will only be more rewards. In any case, I've been with you for so long. When does His Majesty plan to reward me at the banquet? I want to buy some clothes in advance and dress up. He Yan spoke with conviction. Xiao Ju stared at her for a while and smiled. Build a career. If He Yan hadn't said it, she would have almost forgotten that she had said it before. However, He Yan didn't feel anything when he used it to tease her. She nodded shamelessly. Yes, it's already halfway done. Commander-in-Chief, please help me add a little more. If I'm made a high-ranking official, I'll be an official in the same court as you. We can help each other. Xiao Ju laughed. Nonsense. He Yan was a little anxious. She was anxious to enter the palace because this was the only way she could meet up with Su Zhiheng and He Rufei first. In the past, after a victorious general returned to the capital, there would be a banquet in the palace. Hundreds of officials would sit together and it would be a good opportunity for her to appear. Now, she could directly go to the Su family and He family's doorstep and wait for them. However, the effect would not be as good as the other method. Moreover, once she entered the palace, it would be the best opportunity for her to draw a clear line between her and Xiao Ju. Thinking of this, He Yan couldn't help but feel a little sad. When she thought about what Bai Rongwei said during the day, she felt even more depressed. Xiao Ju had always been sharp. He Yan's suddenly depressed expression fell into his eyes. Xiao Ju paused and asked, "What's wrong?" He Yan looked up and changed the topic. "Commander-in-Chief, did you and Miss Shen have a fight?" Xiao Ju was stunned and looked away. "Why do you ask?" "I met young Mistress Xiao in the residence today. She asked me if I knew why you and Miss Shen had a fight." He Yan's voice was bitter. "When I left Liangzhou to go to the Rundu, both of you were fine. Later on, when I met you in the Rundu, Miss Shen didn't come with you. Brother Lin said that it was because he didn't want Miss Shen to be tired from the long journey. Now it seems that you two didn't travel together because you had a fight?" "It wasn't a fight." Xiao Ju interrupted her. "It wasn't necessary." "He Yan, what do you mean, it wasn't necessary?" Xiao Ju lowered his head and stared into her eyes. She couldn't understand the emotions in his eyes. His voice was still calm, as if nothing had happened. "She isn't anyone to me. Why should I bring her along?" He Yan blinked. This atmosphere, this attitude, this tone, it was really easy for people to misunderstand. How could an ordinary girl withstand all this? Even someone like her, who had lived 2 lifetimes, was stirred up. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. "You can't say that. Miss Shen has always been by your side. You two can be considered friends. If there really is a misunderstanding, it's better to talk it out. You came to my room just to say this?" Xiao Ju asked calmly. "Ah, that's not it." He Yan looked at her. "I just wanted to say that if His Majesty wants to hold a banquet before the Mid-Autumn Festival, you must bring me along." Her eyes were full of undisguised eagerness. "I have never met His Majesty. If I can meet him, I can show off to my brother the next time I see him." Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows. "You went to see He Yunxing today?" "Yes." He Yan did not hide anything. "I've been away from home for a long time. My family is worried sick. Now that I'm back in Shuajing, I should let them know that I'm safe." Xiao Ju looked at her meaningfully. "You told them that you're staying at my residence?" He Yan was shocked and immediately denied it. "No, no. I will never do such a thing that tarnishes the governor's reputation. I only said that I'm staying at a friend's house. I didn't say who it was. I don't think they would guess that I'm staying at your residence." Xiao Ju did not know what she meant. She nodded. "Actually, there's no harm in telling them." He looked at the stunned He Yan and said calmly, "You're my right-hand woman. They will find out about our relationship sooner or later." He Yan, what was wrong with Xiao Ju? Their relationship was supposed to be between a superior and a subordinate, but he made it sound like a shameful relationship between a man and a woman. It made her blush and her heart race. She felt embarrassed. Yen cleared her throat. Anyway, just remember to bring me along to the banquet. If you bring me along, I will repay you in the future. Xiaoju sized her up and said lazily, how will you repay me? Yen. I haven't thought about it yet. He sneered and turned to put down the teapot on the table. He said casually, okay, lady, he can come with me for the next banquet. Yen was overjoyed and his eyes curved. Thank you. Chapter 196. After receiving Xiaoju's verbal promise that she would bring Yen to the palace banquet, Yen slept exceptionally soundly that night. When she woke up the next morning, as usual, Xiaoju was not there. There was only Bai Guo sitting in the courtyard, waiting for her to wake up and have breakfast, just like yesterday. Yen was used to waking up early in her previous life. Now that she had slept until late in the morning, she felt embarrassed to let a little girl wait for her. She asked Bai Guo, did your second young master say where he went? Bai Guo shook her head. Is young master he looking for second young master for something urgent? Yen smiled, I'm just asking casually. However, she felt a little strange. After returning to the capital, Xiaoju seemed to be very busy. What exactly was she busy with? However, she did not think too much about it. She had other things to do today. Yen greeted Bai Guo, changed her clothes, and went out. She did not call for a carriage. Instead, she wore a curtain hat and walked on the streets by herself. She could walk past the Su residence with her eyes closed. Not long after, she stopped in front of the vermilion door. Yen stood at the door and looked at the residence in front of her. Looking in from the outside, the residence looked even narrower. It was so narrow that it seemed like it could not contain one's ambition. It was so narrow that it was like a coffin, burying her in it. Yen thought that after so much time had passed, she had already calmed down. However, when she really stood here, she found it difficult to calm down. It was here that Wanru had pushed her into a pool of cold water and she had never seen the sun again. The servant at the door was sweeping the floor. Su Zhiheng was a very particular person. The residence had to be clean at all times. He did not like blemishes, just like how he did not like scars on a woman's skin. Yen walked forward and said, little brother, I want to ask you about someone. The manservant who was sweeping stopped and looked at Yen, asking, you are? I was asked by someone to inquire about someone, Yen said in a low voice. Is there a concubine mother called Wanru in your family? As soon as these words came out, the manservant's face changed. The next moment, he felt a heavy object in his hand. Looking down, he saw that it was an ingot of silver. The manservant swallowed his saliva and subconsciously put the silver into his sleeve. He looked around to make sure no one was paying attention and said in a low voice, young master, please wait for me under the locust tree in the alley ahead. This is not the place to talk. Yen nodded. I understand. You will definitely come. If you can help me find out about this person. She smiled. I won't forget to reward you. The young servant was overjoyed. Of course, of course. Yen did not say much to him. Just as the manservant was worried, this was not the place to talk. Moreover, with the relationship between Su Zhiheng and Hirufei, it was inevitable that Hirufei's men would be walking around outside. She lowered her veil hat and waited under the locust tree in the alley where they had agreed to meet. Yen was not afraid that the manservant would take the silver and not admit it. Although the Su family was also an official family, they were not generous to their servants. It was probably because Su Zhiheng was originally a Hanlin scholar and learned to be a scholar. He was more willing to spend money on decorations, such as the tiles of the residence. Madame Su's favorite saying was, if you treated your servants too well, it would not be good if they became disloyal. You have to know that one should be grateful for one's worth and hate for another. Servants and masters should not get too close. Because she had stayed in the military camp for many years, she did not have much of an opinion about the relationship between servants and masters. She always felt that people were people. High or low status was just an accessory brought about by reincarnation. How could one really rely on this? Therefore, when she first married into the Su family and was not blind, she was very generous. At that time, the servants of the Su family were also very happy to be ordered around by her. It was also because of this matter that He Wanru secretly complained to Su Zhiheng many times about He Yan. Like master, of course, the servant would be the same. Su Zhiheng was a person who could conspire with outsiders to kill his wife for benefits. Therefore, the servants in his residence would certainly be mercenary and would sail according to the wind. Sure enough, after the time it took to burn 2 sticks of incense, someone sneaked into the courtyard. It was the manservant from before. He Yan said, "Little brother, there is a tea house nearby. Let's go in and talk." The manservant nodded. When He Yan arrived at the tea house, he ordered a pot of good tea and a few plates of exquisite desserts. He was extremely generous. The manservant in front of him couldn't help but secretly ponder. Which family's young master was so rich? "Little brother, how should I address you?" He Yan pushed the teacup in front of him. "Young master, you can call me Fu Wang." He Yan did not take off his curtain hat and said softly, "Then Fu Wang, is the concubine mother called He Wanru in the residence right now?" Fu Wang looked troubled. "Young master, I won't hide it from you. Our residence does have a concubine mother called He Wanru. However, a year ago, she stole Madam's property and sold it outside the residence. She was punished by eldest young master. Later, she fell seriously ill and died." He Yan said, "So that's how it is." She was not surprised. A year ago, not long after her death, He Wanru was dealt with by Su Zhiheng. In fact, she had already reminded He Wanru. Since Su Zhiheng could kill her to keep a secret, he could also kill her. "Young master, you are looking for concubine mother He." The manservant looked at He Yan. However, his face was covered by the curtain hat and he could not see what this person looked like. He only vaguely felt that he was very young. "I was concubine mother He's childhood playmate. However, I was not in Shuo Jing in the past." He Yan sighed. "I haven't seen her for many years. I originally wanted to see her, but I didn't expect." Fu Wang suddenly understood. What childhood playmate? Was he interested in He Wanru or was he her past lover? After all, although he had never seen her, he had heard that concubine mother He was very beautiful and charming. She was so attractive that his young master was so infatuated that he did not even care about eldest young mistress. A concubine who made a mistake would not be buried in the Su family's tomb, He Yan said. "Where is she buried? If possible, I want to take her away." "Young master, after concubine mother He died of illness, she was rolled up in a mat and thrown into a mass grave," Fu Wang said with difficulty. "Now, I'm afraid that her bones can no longer be found." He Yan sneered in his heart. At that time, Su Zhiheng was very affectionate towards He Wanru. She had envied him. Now, it seemed that this man was really cold-blooded and heartless. When it came to her, she could say that he did not love her, so he could be so ruthless. But when it came to He Wanru, the woman he truly loved, she was just like this. Fu Wang saw that the man in front of him was silent and thought that he was really a sentimental person. He was already married and still could not forget her. He Yan raised his head and asked him, "Then what about concubine mother He's personal maid? If they are still here, I want to take them away from here. These years, I missed a lot of things about Wanru. Perhaps they can tell me." "Young master, concubine mother He's personal maid left the Fu after she passed away," Fu Wang said. He Yan smiled slightly. "Then what about the other servants in the courtyard?" Fu Wang was stunned. He had just entered the Fu at the beginning of this year. When he entered the Fu, the Su family had also recruited a large number of servants. At that time, the children who came with them were still surprised. Generally speaking, this kind of large family had no lack of servants. Suddenly recruiting so many people, either the house was marrying a new wife and needed servants, or something had happened at home and the original people were no longer there. Su De did marry a new wife, but the wife was General Fei Hong's cousin. Eldest young mistress had brought enough servants with her when she entered the Fu, so the servants did not go to eldest young mistress's courtyard to serve her. Then, something must have happened, so the original people were no longer there. The so-called no longer there actually meant that they were dead? Fu Wang was not stupid. On the contrary, he was the smartest among this group of servants. However, he could only guard the door, so he often complained about the unfairness of fate. However, at this moment, he saw a corner of an iceberg from this strange man's mouth. For things like secrets, the more you knew, the easier it was to die. But at the same time, it was easy to change one's fate. Riches and honor were found in danger. Without risk, how could there be riches and honor? He Yen saw that this servant's eyes were already shining with desire, so she faintly added, Fu Wang, I see that you are quite smart. How does your master treat you? Fu Wang was stunned. After a while, he said, Master, doesn't remember this little one. That's a pity. He Yen smiled. If it were me, I would definitely put a talent like you to good use. Fu Wang was a little excited. Some words did not need to be said. He Yen took out a silver ingot from her sleeve and put it on the table. Today, I also know a lot of information. Thank you. However, if you can help me find out more information, such as concubine mother He's maids, or the servants who were still there at that time, you can get much more than this. Also, she exhorted, when doing these things, be careful. So many servants have left the Fu. The master of the Su family seems to be very strict. If you are not careful, Fu Wang, you might also leave the Fu. That would be a pity. Fu Wang looked at the young master in front of him. He was both nervous and excited. He asked uneasily, but, where should this little one go to find young master? The fish had taken the bait. He Yen smiled slightly. When I have free time, I will come here to sit. Fu Wang, if you need me, you can come here. Who knows when I will come? After saying this, she got up and left the tea room, leaving the servant sitting at the table alone. His expression was unpredictable. As soon as he left, He Yan's smile faded. Before dealing with Fu Wang, He Yan observed the servants coming in and out of the Su family's door. He found that most of them were unfamiliar faces. The group of people when she first married into the Su family were almost all gone. This was very natural. Su Zhiheng wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so those servants could not be left. He Yan actually did not expect to find any survivors. He was afraid that Su Zhiheng had already destroyed all the witnesses. However, she needed a servant like Fu Wang to work for her in the Su family. Paper could not wrap fire. There would always be traces of what was done. It was not a witness, but as long as there was some material evidence, such as something left behind by He Wanru, it could become material evidence one day in the future. If no one found out, Fu Wang could collect information for her. But if someone found out, Su Zhiheng would be nervous. A nervous person's work would always be full of loopholes. A person with a guilty conscience, walking under the sun, would suspect that the shadow was an evil spirit coming for revenge. Fu Wang was smart and ambitious, and that was enough. For example, when He Rufei sent Ding Yi to harm her, Su Zhiheng, as her pillow, watched coldly from the sidelines. How they used the people around her to deal with her, she did not do anything and returned it all. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei's nightmare had just begun. When He Yan returned to the Shao family, it was almost evening. As soon as he walked into the courtyard, he heard Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing talking. Xiao Jing said, "You don't have to make so many. One for Huijin is enough." Bai Rongwei rebuked, "How can you do this? Besides, these sachets were all embroidered by the servant girls. I just stuffed some herbs inside. It's not hard." He Yan stopped and bowed to them. Young Master Xiao, Young Mistress. Young Master He, Bai Rongwei said with a smile. You came at the right time. I was just about to ask someone to give you a sachet. She took 2 sachets from the servant girl beside her and handed them to He Yan. One is for you, and the other is for Huijin. He Yan took them and looked at them. The sachets were very small. One was black with a silver python embroidered on it, and the other was an ordinary auspicious cloud pattern. They should be for her. It's almost the Mid-Autumn Festival. I asked the servant girls to make some sachets. There are herbs and protective talismans inside. You and Huijin often go out, so it's not bad to have them. She smiled. Young Master He, please don't dislike them. He Yan did not expect that she would have one. He was very surprised. I won't dislike them. Thank you very much, young mistress. You're Huijin's friend. You don't have to be so polite, Xiao Jing said warmly. He Yan nodded. She was always at a loss when it came to the overflowing kindness of the Xiao family couple. That's right, in 3 days, there will be a banquet. Bai Rongwei seemed a little embarrassed. I told young Master He earlier that the banquet will be hosted in my name. At that time, there will be many madams and misses. Young Master He, are you busy that day? If not, you can stay at home. He Yan, they were choosing a wife for Xiao Ju. Why was she chosen? He Yan hurriedly said, let's talk about it later, and ran away. Looking at He Yan's back as he hurried away, Bai Rongwei said curiously, why is young Master He so afraid when he hears about a girl? Although he's still young, it's not impossible for him to get engaged. Could it be that he's been with Huijin for too long and wants to be alone for the rest of his life? Xiao Jing smiled. Huijin treats him very well. That's true. Bai Rongwei nodded. After she married into the family, although she knew that Xiao Ju didn't have a bad heart, she wasn't someone who liked to show her emotions. But towards this young Master He, it could be said that she was very protective of him. It's good to have friends. Xiao Jing's gaze was gratified. At least, there are many things that he can discuss with others. Under the oil lamp, He Yan leaned on the table and looked at the sachet that was wrapped around her finger. Bai Rongwei gave her 2 sachets and asked her to give the other one to Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's sachet was very beautiful. He Yan wrapped the red string around her finger and sighed in her heart. Even the maid of the Xiao family was so good at needlework. It really made her feel ashamed. He Yan obviously didn't know how to needlework. When she first married into the Su family, He Wanru would make shoes and clothes for Su Zhiheng every few days. He Yan stayed up several nights and only managed to make a handkerchief. She wanted to embroider mandarin ducks playing in water on the handkerchief. Su Zhiheng stared at it for a long time before asking, "This is a duck?" He Yan was greatly shocked. Su Zhiheng laughed loudly. Although he later accepted the handkerchief, he didn't use it. He Yan understood. After all, he was an official in the imperial court. If he took out a handkerchief with a duck embroidered on it, he would be laughed at by his colleagues. But later, when she found the crumpled and yellowed handkerchief at the bottom of Su Zhiheng's drawer, she felt a little wronged when she thought about how her hands were full of needle marks. She had always been learning things that men needed to learn. She didn't know how to play the zither, go, calligraphy, painting, needlework and embroidery. When she had to work as an ordinary woman, she felt at a loss. There was also a small wooden basket on the table. In the basket, there were some needlework and silver scissors. It should be used by the servants. He Yan picked up the silver scissors. The scissors were very delicate. She was used to holding swords, knives, sticks, and spears with both hands. But this pair of scissors felt particularly heavy. In fact, He Yan didn't know how to do needlework at all. After all, during the years that he joined the army, he only had 2 sets of clothes. It was inevitable that there would be times when they would be tattered. As long as there was a tear, the brothers would casually find a piece of cloth or something to fill in the hole. But in the end, The men's skills weren't as meticulous as the women's. It could only be said that they sewed, but it really couldn't be considered beautiful. Sometimes, if there were too many patches on a piece of clothing, it would look worse than a beggar on the street. He Yan had also sewed by candlelight before, but that was already a matter of his previous life. The two sachets were placed side by side in front of her. Xiao Ju's sachet was more gorgeous, while He Yan's was more ordinary. She reached out and pinched it. The insides were flat. She could vaguely feel a triangular piece of paper and some hairy medicinal herbs. He Yan thought for a moment, then took out the needlework from the wooden basket. The oil in the oil lamp was about to burn out. He Yan stretched and stood up. Half the night had passed. She wiped the beads of blood from her fingers and lightly sighed. It seems that Lady He's needlework wasn't very good. In both her previous and current life, she really didn't have any talent for needlework. He Yan smiled, extinguished the lamp, and got on the bed. The moonlight outside the window was weak, faintly illuminating a corner of the front table. On the table, there were two sachets lying side by side. They didn't look any different from before. In the capital, Shen Mushua's room, the lanterns were still lit. The servants in the courtyard were already asleep, but Shen Mushue wasn't sleepy at all. She laid flat on the bed and stared at the sachets hanging in the four corners of the curtains. It had been a few days since she returned to the capital. Xiao Ju should have already known. This time, she didn't go to the Xiao mansion. But at the same time, Xiao Ju didn't say anything. It was eldest Madame Bai Rong who sent someone to the Xiao mansion to ask about her. Shen Mushue was a bit annoyed as she turned over. Even Censor Shen could tell that something was wrong. He asked her if she had quarreled with Xiao Ju. Shen Mushue shook her head and perfunctorily brushed it off. But in her heart, she felt a bit more nervous. She originally wanted to let Xiao Ju know that she was uncomfortable. But after a few days of stalemate, she was the one who was unsure. Perhaps Xiao Ju didn't know. He was a person who didn't care about these things. But what if he knew, and did it on purpose? There was a ball of fire in Shen Mushue's heart. When she left the Liang Zhou guards, she found a figurine and a drawing made of wood in the box. She couldn't help but think about it. The figurine was a woman. Did Xiao Ju have someone in his heart? If that was the only thing, she wouldn't be so worried. But the figurine on the drawing was a female general. And her eyes were very similar to He Yan's. In an instant, all the things that she had suspected in the past became evidence in front of her eyes. Xiao Ju was overly close to and took care of He Yan. He Yan sometimes showed signs that made her uncomfortable. When they were in Jiang, Xiao Ju had also brought He Yan along. Xiao Ju's black jade, which never left his side, was once in He Yan's hand. The ointment that Xiao Ju especially emphasized not to take away appeared in He Yan's hands the next day. If he was gay, it would be too shocking. But, what if He Yan was a woman? Shen Mushue closed her eyes. When the young lady was dressed as a young man, she was already very handsome and eye-catching. Her eyes were delicate and pretty. If she was dressed as a woman, Shen Mushue thought bitterly. She could easily catch people's attention. In the past few years, although she didn't have Xiao Ju, she didn't feel too threatened. This young man was very outstanding when he was young. He had a lazy temperament. Later on, when his family experienced great changes, he became more indifferent and introverted. Although his temperament was like this, his talent and appearance made the ladies who liked him throw themselves at him dauntlessly. But she had never seen Xiao Ju fall in love with anyone. He wasn't easy to fall in love. So Shen Mushue believed that she was the only woman in the world who could accompany him on the battlefield and support him. As long as there was enough time, everything would happen naturally. Her confidence came from her arrogance. But now, her arrogance was completely shattered. There was a woman who could do more than her. Not only could she accompany Xiao Ju on the battlefield, but she could also fight side by side with him. He Yan could do what she couldn't. As for family background, Xiao Jing could even marry Bai Rongwei, who was a concubine's daughter. Xiao family didn't care about this at all. Shen Mushua's heart tightened. She couldn't get Xiao Ju's love, but she also didn't want to see He Yan beat her to it. She was the one who came first. She was the one who stayed by Xiao Ju's side the longest. In the dark night, Shen Mushue suddenly sat up. She put on her outer clothes, walked to the table, and lit the oil lamp. She found paper, brush, and ink and sat in front of the table. The light from the oil lamp was so dazzling that it hurt her eyes. Her hands were trembling slightly. After a while, Shen Mushue seemed to have made up her mind. She picked up the brush and started writing. No one would be satisfied if they didn't get a happy ending after spending so much time and energy. She couldn't accept such an ending. If Xiao Ju wasn't destined to stand on her side and think for her, then, she could only start from He Yan's side. Shen Mushue wrote faster and faster. Suddenly, the tip of the brush was wrong. She used too much strength and scratched the paper. She stared blankly at the thin paper in front of her. She suddenly raised her hand, rolled the paper into a ball, and threw it on the floor. After a while, she covered her face with her hands and cried softly. Chapter 197. The residence that Lin Shuanghe found for He Yan had been missing for several days. Ever since he returned to Shuajing, Lin Shuanghe acted as if he didn't exist. He Yan also didn't want to rashly go to his door to find him. It wasn't good to ask someone to do something and rush him. After a while, He Yan began to suspect that this person was doing it on purpose. As usual, Xiao Ju left early in the morning and returned late at night. He didn't know what she was busy with. He Yan would appear during the day. Ever since she went to the Su residence to see Fu Wang, she didn't go to the Su residence again. She had to give Fu Wang the cold shoulder. When Fu Wang saw that He Yan didn't appear for a long time, he would definitely give up on the idea of pushing and pulling her. He was afraid that he would let go of this money tree. In order to prove his worth, he would only put in more effort to find useful information from the Su residence. He Yan wasn't in a hurry. In the past few days, other than secretly seeing He Yunqing again, she also spent a few days at the entrance of the He residence. She didn't know if it was because of He Rufei, but the number of guards outside the He residence had more than doubled. He Yan didn't want to expose himself, so he could only hide in the dark and observe. He Rufei didn't do anything other than go to court every day. He and his colleagues mostly socialized at restaurants and didn't bring anyone home. In addition, he also went to the Su residence once with the so-called tonic for visiting his cousin. But was it really to visit He Xining? He Yan didn't think so. But in the eyes of outsiders, He Rufei's actions clearly showed that he had a close relationship with his younger sister. There were even rumors that because of the accident that happened to Su Yunqing's grandmother, He Rufei took care of his younger sister even more carefully. In the end, it actually gave He Rufei a good reputation. He Yan only felt that it was a bit funny. He also felt that the He family's methods of acting were really endless. Autumn had arrived and the heat of summer had completely faded. On this day, He Yan had just returned from outside the residence and was surprised to find that the courtyard was much more lively. She had left early in the morning and did not know what had happened. However, Bai Gua happily ran over and whispered, "Young mistress is entertaining guests in the courtyard. Young master, you should wash up a little and go take a look." She leaned closer and said mysteriously, "There are many young ladies here today. Second young master is here too." She was young, so when she said these words, she was not shy or coy, but full of the innocence of a child. However, when He Yan heard these words, they were not very pleasant to hear. Bai Rongwei had told her before that she would hold a banquet before the Mid-Autumn Festival. On the surface, it was to invite the ladies, but in fact, it was to matchmake Xiao Ju. He Yan didn't expect her to come back so quickly. Usually, Xiao Ju would come back late. Sometimes, she would be asleep by the time Xiao Ju came back. But today, there was a girl around and she came back so early. What a coincidence. Bai Guo saw that He Yan was silent and said, "Young master." He Yan came back to his senses and forced a smile, "I won't go. I've been running around the whole day and I'm really tired. I want to go back to my room and rest." Bai Guo, but... She felt that He Yan was in a bad mood and felt that it was strange. This young master, he was gentle and did not put on airs. He would take the initiative to clean the dishes and chopsticks. Sometimes, when he saw that she was hungry, he would deliberately leave some snacks in the dishes for her. Bai Guo felt that among all the masters she had met, other than the young master and his wife, this young master he was the best. However, today, his unhappiness was clearly written on his face. After all, they had been master and servant for a while. Bai Guo thought, could it be that he had been wronged outside? Before she could figure it out, He Yan walked quickly down the corridor with his head lowered. He Yan thought that what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. However, this corridor was connected to the pavilion of the main courtyard. Bai Rongwei saw him at a glance and called out, "Young master He." If he pretended that he didn't hear her, it would be too deliberate. He Yan could only brace himself and turn around. He looked at Bai Rongwei and smiled, "Young Mistress Xiao." Bai Rongwei stood up and walked towards him. "I was just asking Huijin when you would come back. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to make it in time for today's autumn banquet. You came at the right time. We haven't started yet." The host was so kind. It would be impolite to leave at this time. He Yan could only walk over and salute her. "Young mistress is so considerate." Xiao family's house was specially renovated according to his wife's preferences when old General Xiao was still alive. Xiao Ju's grandmother was from Suzhou. Therefore, the Xiao family's courtyard was especially elegant and unique in Shuo capital. Bai Rongwei didn't invite many guests to the banquet. There were only 4 or 5 people in total. It wasn't clear whether they were her good friends or not. However, the 4 young women sitting there were each beautiful in their own way. Xiao Ju sat beside Xiao Jing. The 2 brothers were famous for being handsome men in Dewei. For a moment, the courtyard was like a fairyland. Dewei had a strict rule against men and women. Men and women were not allowed to sit together at the age of 7. This rule was abolished not long after Emperor Wenxuan ascended the throne. Emperor Wenxuan yearned for the elegant and unrestrained manner of the famous scholars of the past. He didn't think that it was because of the old rules. Therefore, Dewei wasn't as strict towards unmarried men and women as the previous dynasty. Bai Rongwei smiled and explained to the others at the banquet, "This is young master He. He is a good friend of Huijin. At such a young age, he has already been bestowed the title of Muan Lang by His Majesty." She ordered the servants to add a bowl and chopsticks for He Yan. However, for some reason, the bowl was placed next to Xiao Jing. Bai Rongwei sat next to a round-faced madam and said to He Yan, "Today, we have invited a few friends to our residence to try the newly made chrysanthemum crisps. Everyone, please treat this as a normal family banquet. There is no need to be polite. Just be at ease." Although she said that, other than Xiao Jing and his wife, the older madams, and the indifferent Xiao Ju, the rest of the guests couldn't be considered casual. He Yan sat next to Xiao Ju and looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju sat on the other side of Xiao Jing. He rarely touched his chopsticks. Most of the time, he just sat there. Although he hid it well, if one looked closely, they could see that he was impatient. The other maidens were different. They sat at the long table directly opposite Xiao Ju. The more timid ones glanced at Xiao Ju out of the corner of their eyes. The lingering affection in their eyes couldn't be ignored. The bolder ones stared directly at Xiao Ju. Their beautiful eyes were filled with adoration. It was enough to make one's bones melt. He Yan thought to himself. Bai Rongwei knew that Xiao Ju didn't like people like Shenmuxue. The 4 maidens that she found were completely different from Shenmuxue's cold and aloof temperament. However, their appearance was comparable to Shenmuxue's. Sitting there, she wanted to flip the table and leave. If Shenmuxue was here, he would definitely be angered to death. However, although she thought this in her heart, she couldn't show it on her face. He Yen lowered his head and ate. At this time, he didn't talk while eating. He just treated it as a normal meal. The only difference was that there were 4 beautiful maidens sitting across from him. This meal was extremely awkward. He Yen wasn't the only one who felt awkward. At the end of the meal, even Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei couldn't handle it. After all, although Xiao Ju's personality wasn't as gentle as Xiao Jing's, her face was still very attractive. Moreover, Xiao Jing was already married. The 4 maidens all looked at Xiao Ju. They were all noble maidens who were carefully raised in Shuajing. They were very polite. However, the 4 of them still found some topics to talk about with Xiao Ju. For example, does second young master Xiao like autumn? What do you do on a daily basis? Will you be staying in Shuajing after this? And other meaningless questions. Xiao Ju answered them. However, if she could answer them in 1 word, she wouldn't say more than 2. Most of the time, it was Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing who came out to fill in the gaps. He Yen was quite happy in his heart. However, when he thought about it, he felt that he was being silly. How could he be happy about such things? Was he possessed? Night was coming. After the meal, the madam said goodbye to Xiao Jing and her husband. He Yen and Xiao Ju stood to the side. The 4 maidens' reluctant gazes almost saw through Xiao Ju. One of the bolder maidens looked at Xiao Ju and asked with a smile, when second young master Xiao was at the hunting ground, no one could compare to his charm. After this, when are you free? Would you be willing to practice archery with me? Xiao Ju looked at her expressionlessly for a while. Then, the corner of her mouth twitched. I have a habit when I practice. The maiden looked forward to it. Life and death. Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Jing interrupted in time. She laughed and said, Huijin is joking. He likes to joke. However, as soon as she said this, the maiden's mother's expression changed. She quickly pulled her daughter away. Bai Rongwei was angry and amused at the same time. After they left, she said to Xiao Ju, You child, why are you still the same as before? If you don't like her, then don't like her. Why do you have to deliberately scare her? Miss Tian has also practiced martial arts. She is also cheerful and generous. I think she is very good. When Xiao Ju didn't say anything, Bai Rongwei continued, What about Miss Li? The one who sat opposite you just now. She looks weak and delicate. She has good handwriting and can speak eloquently. She is very gentle and quiet. Xiao Ju still didn't say anything. Bai Rongwei looked up and saw He Yen. She asked He Yen, Young Master He, you have also met the 4 maidens today. Don't you think it is a good idea? He Yen was speechless. What did this have to do with her? Disaster really fell from the sky. However, in front of these people, He Yen could only ask himself. He slowly opened his mouth, the 4 maidens are very good. Their temperaments and appearances are first class. Whoever marries them will be blessed by his past life. Bai Rongwei probably felt that she had gained the approval of Xiao Ju's good friend. She said, Huijin, look, even young master he thinks they are good. Xiao Ju suddenly said in a calm voice, Sister-in-law, if you think they are good, why don't you invite them back and give them to Big Brother? With Big Brother's temperament and appearance, they shouldn't feel wronged. These words were so harsh that even the usually gentle Xiao Jing couldn't help but warn, Xiao Huijin. Xiao Ju was unmoved. She glanced at Xiao Jing and said calmly, Big Brother, why don't you think about what you did when Mother wanted to choose a wife for you? Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Big Brother should know better than I do. After she finished speaking, she didn't care about Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei's reactions and left in a huff. He Yen stood there and felt inexplicably awkward. He softly explained to Xiao Ju, perhaps the commander-in-chief is in a bad mood today. Young mistress, please don't take it to heart. I'm not taking it to heart. Bai Rongwei was stunned for a moment. She seemed to have recovered from her shock and looked at her husband. However, was Huijin angry just now? Despite the rumors that the Right Army's commander-in-chief training troops was unreasonable, harsh, and cold, almost no one had ever seen Xiao Ju lose his temper in the Fu. Most of the time, he was just too lazy to care. It seemed like it had been many years since he had written the words, "I'm angry," on his face. He's done this before. Why is he so angry this time? She didn't understand. Someone was knocking on the door. Again and again, the knocking was very precise and unyielding. Even if the people inside were too lazy to pay attention to it, the people outside were not discouraged. It was as if they were going to knock until the end of time if they did not open the door. In the entire courtyard, the only person who had the guts to do this was the heroine. Xiao Ju paused for a moment and said, "Come in." He Yan's head poked in from behind the door. She also knew that Xiao Ju was in a bad mood. She had a fawning smile on her face as she closed the door behind her. She walked forward and asked, "Commander-in-Chief, are you all right?" Xiao Ju sat on the chair and replied, "I'm fine." Looking at his expression, he didn't seem to be fine. What he said to Bai Rongwei just now was a little too much. However, He Yan was quite happy to hear him say that. However, she quickly scolded herself in her heart. How could she be like this? How could she, as an outsider, cheer for a family conflict? How was she different from those despicable people? During her stay here, Bai Rongwei had taken care of her a lot. It was reasonable for her to help mediate and not add fuel to the fire. He Yan ran in front of him and leaned half of her body on the table. She looked at him and said, "Commander-in-Chief, young Mistress Xiao has good intentions. What you did just now was a little hurtful." Xiao Ju's gaze shifted to her face. His eyes were cold. "Lady He, what do you think I should do?" He had called her Lady He many times. Sometimes it was teasing, and sometimes it was mean. However, this time, it was cold and even a little angry. He Yan carefully chose her words. "At least, you should be more tactful." Xiao Ju sneered. "Why should I?" He Yan choked. "If it was Lady He, would you be more tactful?" He suddenly asked. He Yan was puzzled. "I'm a woman. If your father and brother were to find a few handsome young masters like they did today," he said sarcastically, "wouldn't you reject them directly?" He Yan thought that if it was in the past, she would have to be polite and courteous in order to save everyone's face. However, now that she had someone she liked, she would not be able to force it. However, she could not say this to Xiao Ju. The person in front of her did not care about her avoidance. He stared at her and asked again, "Lady He, what should you do?" He Yan could not go against her conscience when she met his gaze. After a while, she slammed the table. "I thought about it. If it were me, I would have made the same choice as you, Commander-in-Chief. Maybe I would have said even worse things." "Commander-in-Chief, you're right." "Well said. If you don't like them, just reject them. There's no need to give them the wrong hints. Sometimes, being polite and courteous can be seen as flirting to the other party. Flirting can make others unable to sleep at night. If you don't have such intentions, then you're lying." In the end, there was a hint of complaint in her tone. No one knew who she was referring to. Xiao Ju saw her indignant expression and her expression softened. She smiled. "At least you have some awareness." He Yan saw that she was in a better mood. She took out a sachet from her sleeve and gave it to her. "This is for you." Xiao Ju took it and looked at it. She looked up and asked, "You made this? How is that possible?" He Yan replied without hesitation. "How could I know how to make this? It was Grandma Xiao who made it. She also made one for me. I forgot to give it to you earlier." She took out her own sachet with cloud patterns. "I heard that there are herbs and amulets in it." She saw that Xiao Ju was holding the sachet and didn't say anything. She leaned closer. "I didn't expect Grandma Xiao to prepare one for me. Commander-in-Chief, Grandma Xiao is gentle and kind. She's wholeheartedly thinking about you. Although the method is not to your liking, you should talk to her about this kind of thing. There's no need to hurt the harmony between the two of you. There's no need to be so calculative between family members. She kept talking and moving her head closer and closer. Xiao Zhu couldn't help but laugh. He bent his fingers and pushed her head back. Stop, I'm not angry. At first, he was angry, but it wasn't because of Bai Rongwei. This person still didn't know anything. He felt a little helpless. Being angry at someone who didn't know anything was destined to not be able to vent his anger. Really? He Yan looked at him. Really? He lowered his eyes and thought of something. After a while, he said, I'll be out of the city for a few days. Is it okay for you to stay here alone? He Yan was startled. Do you need my help? Xiao Zhu had been leaving early and returning late these days. He Yan could sense that he had something important to do. It must have something to do with Su Jingfu and Xiao Zhongwu. Although she was busy with the He family and the Su family, if Xiao Zhu needed her help, He Yan wouldn't refuse. No need. I can do it myself. He Yan nodded. When will you be back? I'm not sure. Xiao Zhu looked at the burning wick. I'll try to be back before mid-autumn. Prime Minister Su's residence in the capital was brightly lit at this moment. Prime Minister Su was a scholar. When he held a banquet at home, he didn't like women to dance. At most, he would find 2 guqin players to play the guqin. Chu Xiao knelt in front of the small table and looked at the teacup in front of him. The steam rising from the teacup was like a layer of gauze that covered his expression, making his face look unreal. Su Jingfu didn't like to drink. He only liked to drink tea. The people who came to the Su family to give gifts also knew how to cater to his preferences. Even the tea leaves that were given to the servants could be sold at a good price. The servants stood on both sides respectfully. Su Jingfu didn't have a son. Everyone in the Su family knew that Su Jingfu treated this favorite pupil of his as his own son. Su Jingfu's only daughter, Su Pingting, had a deep affection for Chu Xilan. Sooner or later, the teacher and the student would become husband and son-in-law. You went to Jiang very smoothly this time. Su Jingfu said with a smile. When he was young, he was handsome and refined, but when he grew older, he became kind and amiable. Just by looking at his appearance, one would think that he was an old man who was easy to get along with. He took a sip of tea and said, however, when you were in the Rundu, why did you stay for a few more days? Chu Xiao replied gently, the people in the Rundu were hungry. Xilan couldn't bear to leave alone. I wanted to stay in the Rundu to help and see if I could ask for reinforcements. I didn't expect that Generals Yan would lead troops to help and solve the Rundu's urgent situation. It was obvious that he wasn't lying. Su Jingfu was still smiling kindly. He didn't say that he was right, but he didn't say that he was wrong either. The atmosphere was a little tense. Just as they were in a deadlock, a girl's voice suddenly sounded, Father. Why didn't you call me when Brother Xilan came? The next moment, a girl in a yellow dress flew in like a flower and sat next to Chu Xilan. This girl was very beautiful. She was as delicate as a porcelain doll. There was an air of arrogance between her eyebrows. She looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. Her clothes and jewelry were luxurious and expensive. There was a ruby hairpin in her hair bun. The ruby was delicate and beautiful, making her look like a rose. This was Su Jingfu's only daughter, Su Pingting. Su Jingfu only had this pearl in his palm when he was old. He almost spoiled her to the heavens. Even the current princess was not as fastidious as Su Pingting. When Su Pingting arrived at the banquet hall, the atmosphere immediately eased. Su Jingfu shook his head and laughed. You came here to criticize me. You don't even care about me. Everyone says that girls are biased towards outsiders. Really, when Su Pingting heard that, she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, She raised her eyebrows and said coquettishly, I see father every day, but I haven't seen brother Xylan in a long time. Father, can you not let brother Xylan go too far away from the capital next time? She naturally held Chu Xiao's arm and looked at him. Brother Xylan, when I heard that you went to Jiang, I was scared to death. How could father do that? Fortunately, you're fine. When you weren't around, I prayed for your safe return in front of the Bodhisattva every day. It seems that the Bodhisattva heard my prayers and protected you. Su Jingfu said sourly, I didn't see you praying for me. Father. Okay, little ancestor. I won't say any more, okay? Su Jingfu begged and looked at Chu Xiao. However, Xylan, you came at the right time. I have something to say. Chu Xylan looked at Su Jingfu. Teacher, please speak. I heard that today, Xiao Ruby's wife invited a few young ladies from her colleagues' manors to the Xiao mansion as guests. She said that they were guests, but it was obviously to choose a wife for Xiao Huijin. You're about the same age as Xiao Huijin. Since I'm your teacher, I should worry about these things for you. Su Pingting was stunned. Her face immediately turned red. Father, now you know how to be shy. Su Jingfu smiled and teased. Then, he said, Xylan, you're my most outstanding student. You grew up with Pingting and are Qing Mei's childhood sweetheart. When you were young, I planned to marry Pingting to you when you grew up. Looking at it now, that time has come. What do you think? The servants in the hall all buried their heads to hide their surprise. Although they knew that this day would come, they couldn't help but feel surprised when they actually heard it. After all, with Chu Xiao's status, marrying Prime Minister Su's daughter was really climbing up the social ladder. Chu Xiao stood up, lifted the corner of his robe, and knelt down in front of Su Jingfu. He bowed to Su Jingfu. This student thanks teacher for your kindness. To be able to marry Pingting is this student's good fortune from 3 lifetimes. Marriage is completely up to teacher. Chapter 198. It was late at night. The lights in the courtyard had already been extinguished. Only the lantern at the door was lit, like a firefly perched on a leaf, about to fly away in the next moment. Ying Xiang walked forward with the lantern and greeted, Fourth young master. Chu Xiao raised his head and glanced at her. Didn't I tell you not to wait for me? This servant couldn't sleep, Ying Xiang said softly. I came out with the lantern to take a look and coincidentally bumped into you. Chu Xiao did not speak and entered the room. You can leave. Ying Xiang bowed and left the room, closing the door behind her. Chu Xiao sat in front of the table and pressed his forehead. Just now at the Su residence, Su Jingfu's words floated in his ears. Xylan, I only have one daughter. In the future, you can't bully Pingting. If Pingting comes home and complains to me, even if I'm your teacher, I won't let you off. Su Pingting pouted, why would brother Xylan bully me? But brother Xylan is so handsome, there are many girls in Shua capital who like him. After I become brother Xylan's wife, if there are any blind vixens who throw themselves at brother Xylan, she raised her eyebrows and said loudly, I will skin them alive. What kind of girl is she? How can she be so violent all the time? Su Jingfu said this, but he had no intention of stopping Su Pingting. The seemingly warm image of this father and daughter filled his mind, and he couldn't help but bend over. His stomach churned with nausea, and he retched a few times. Before he went to the Su residence today, Chu Xiao had asked Ying Xiang to stay in the room. In fact, after returning to Shua capital, he had asked Ying Xiang to stay in the Chu residence and not go out unless there were other circumstances. Now that the marriage between him and Su Pingting was almost out in the open, Ying Xiang would be in even more danger. When he was young, he became the disciple of Su Jingfu. Thanks to Su Jingfu, Madame Chu did not dare to act against him as openly as before. Su Jingfu also treated him well. For a child, he gave Chu Xiao enough face. Because he was Su Jingfu's student, it was convenient for him to interact with others. As Su Jingfu's daughter, Su Pingting was about the same age as him. In the beginning, Chu Xiao didn't hate her as much. When Su Pingting was a teenager, she was already the apple of the Su family's eye. She could get whatever she wanted. Other than being a little arrogant, she treated Chu Xiao very well. She always followed behind Chu Xiao like a tail, calling him Brother Xilan. Sometimes, she would tell Chu Xiao, Pingting will marry Brother Xilan in the future. Brother Xilan belongs to Pingting alone. He took it as a joke until Chu Xiao was 14 years old. Chu Linfeng was famous for being a handsome man in Xiao Zhongwu's generation. Even if he didn't become Shi Jinbo, he could still win the hearts of many girls with his good looks. Chu Xiao's mother, Yi Runmei, was also beautiful. Chu Xiao modeled himself after the couple. When he was 14 years old, he was as beautiful as the two brothers in the Xiao family. His personality was gentle and considerate, and he knew how to take care of people. Many girls secretly fell in love with him. Among them, there was a young lady named Xian. She was fiery and passionate, and her eyes were very charming. She was different from the other shy girls in the Shuo capital. After meeting a few times, she directly expressed her feelings to Chu Xiao. Of course, Chu Xiao rejected her, but she didn't give up. She didn't pester him, but she sent things to the Chu family every few days. Occasionally, when they met in the Shuo capital, Miss Qian didn't refute. She just stared at him, making him feel helpless. Not long after, something happened to Miss Qian. It was said that she was killed by thieves when she was out on a walk with her friends. Her death was very tragic. Her eyes were gouged out, shocking the entire capital. Miss Qian's father was only a minor 7th-rank official. After reporting it to the authorities, they couldn't find the murderer. When Chu Xiao heard the news, he was stunned for a long time. He couldn't believe that the girl who always winked at him had died so quietly. Later, half a year after the incident, he went to the Su family to find Su Jingfu. When he passed by the small hall, he heard Su Pingting talking to the servant next to her. She's just a lowly commoner. How dare she compete with me? She doesn't know how much she's worth. I'll gouge out her eyes. Let's see how she can seduce Brother Xilan in the future. If there's another woman who doesn't have eyes pestering Brother Xilan in the future, I won't be merciful like before. The girl's laughter was soft and innocent, but it was full of malice. Just like that, she completely destroyed another girl of her age. Chu Xiao's heart was cold from head to toe. But now, he was going to be tied to this woman and grow old together. How ironic was that? He slowly sat up straight. One night, when he was still in the Liang province guards, Lin Qingtan's grandson, the white-robed divine hand Lin Shuanghe, had said something to him. Fourth young master Chu, if you care about little sister He, you should stay away from her. You have a tigress in your family, but our little sister He doesn't want to be the second Miss Qian. His eyes changed unpredictably. There was a flat Shi-Tu lying next to the pen holder. The Shi-Tu was in the shape of a horse. It seemed that he could see through the Shi-Tu and see the night sky. The girl casually wiped the sweat on her forehead, took a knife and seriously chopped down. Then, she handed the Shi-Tu to him. Whose voice was it? It was bright and clear, as clean as a spring stream. Zhao, it means radiance. Xilan means vanilla. The person who gave you this name must have loved you very much. They hoped that you would have a noble character and a bright future. That's why they gave you such an elegant name. He had already stayed in the darkness for many years. But when the first ray of light appeared, even though he knew that it didn't belong to him, he still wanted to greedily hold it in his hand. He Yan deliberately woke up a little late the next morning. After eating breakfast and greeting Bai Gua, He Yan leisurely left the room. It had already been a few days since she last went to the Su family. It seemed that the manservant called Fu Wang had been looking at her with longing these past few days. As for the rest of His Majesty's reward money, she kept it all in her sleeve. When dealing with people, money was indispensable. Although she was now a small official, she didn't have much money. If she bribed people a few more times, she wouldn't have any extra money. He Yan wondered if he should go find Lin Shuanghe to borrow some money and then go to Lutong village to make a few rounds. But last time, he won money at Lutong village and offended the banker. If he went this time, he was afraid that he would be refused at the door. While thinking about the serious problem of where to get the money, He Yan had already arrived at the tea house where she met Fu Wang. She first smiled and gave the waiter at the entrance of the tea house some broken silver. She casually asked, "Has anyone come to see me these past few days?" The waiter quickly took the broken silver and smiled, "Yes, yes, yes. The little brother who came with young master last time has been coming 3 times a day these past few days. If you sit down, I reckon that he will come again soon." He Yan smiled, "Then I'll have to trouble little brother to bring a pot of tea." After saying that, she walked to the elegant room where they met last time and sat down. After giving Fu Wang the cold shoulder for so long, He Yan had already guessed that Fu Wang would most likely be unable to restrain himself, but she didn't expect that he would be so impatient. However, this was a good thing for her. Su Zhiheng's method of buying people's hearts was too poor. Or perhaps, he only cared about buying the people above him and forgot to win over the people below him. Sure enough, He Yan hadn't even sat for a quarter of an hour when someone came outside and knocked on the door. He Yan said, "Please come in." The door was pushed open. Fu Wang closed the door and walked in with large strides. "Young master." Seeing He Yan, this person was very excited. "This little one thought that you weren't in Shuajing. These past few days have been really worrying me to death." He Yan reached out to him, "Sit." When Fu Wang sat down, she slowly opened her mouth. "These past few days, I have important matters to attend to. Only today did I have the time to come here." She poured a cup of tea for Fu Wang and said in a very gentle tone, "Little brother is so anxious to find me. Is there any news?" "News, naturally there is." Fu Wang revealed a difficult expression. He Yan understood tacitly and placed an ingot of silver in front of him. "Young master is a kind person." "Thank you, young master." Fu Wang beamed with joy and put the ingot into his pocket before saying, "Young master wanted to inquire about the matter. This little one has been paying attention in the Fu. It's just that when concubine mother he was in trouble, the group of servants in concubine mother he's courtyard were all gone. Some left the Fu, some were sold. In the end, no one was left. This little one also pieced together some information from the servants in the other courtyards." He lowered his voice and looked around nervously. "Actually, those servants are all dead." When he said this, he deliberately wanted to look at He Yan's expression. Unfortunately, the face of the person sitting in front of him was covered by a veil and he couldn't see clearly. However, seeing that he could still calmly drink his tea, he didn't look very surprised. "Young master, do you know what the situation would be if all the servants in a courtyard were executed?" He Yan smiled slightly, silencing people. He originally wanted to keep him in suspense, but he didn't think that he would be seen through in one glance. Fu Wang was a bit discouraged and didn't have the same intention of keeping him in suspense like before. He answered honestly, "That is indeed the case. This little one heard that concubine mother he had committed an unforgivable crime. Therefore, the so-called punishment of the family law was actually to kill her. The servants in her courtyard all knew the truth, so they didn't have a way to live." When Fu Wang heard about this from other people, he felt a chill down his spine when he thought about it now. Even if the servants in the courtyard were sold into the hands of their masters, dozens of lives, even if it was reported to the Shua capital, it was still a big matter. Moreover, the Su family was a scholarly family, yet they could still kill dozens of people without batting an eyelid. It was unavoidably frightening. It also made people curious. What kind of crime did concubine mother he commit? Adultery? That wouldn't be to the extent of killing all the servants in the courtyard. There were also guards in the courtyard. It couldn't be that when concubine mother he was having an affair with someone, those guards were still outside watching? To be able to let everyone in the courtyard know, and to have people die to keep the secret, what kind of crime was it? "Is that all?" He Yan asked. Fu Wang said, "That's all." He Yen smiled, little brother, the things you said seem to be secrets, but in reality, they are of no help to my matter. If that's all you found, then there's no need for us to continue this transaction. She stood up, these days, I've troubled you. It's been hard on you. After she finished speaking, she acted as if she was about to leave without any reluctance. Fu Wang's heart tightened, and he blurted out, Gongzi, please wait. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted it. Doing business, sometimes it wasn't just about doing business, it was about who was more patient. He was afraid that he would lose this money tree, so he spoke out to urge her to stay, but he also exposed himself. He Yen turned her head to look at him. Could it be that little brother still has some information that you haven't finished speaking? Knowing that he had been seen through by the person in front of him, Fu Wang braced himself and said, Gongzi, please sit down and talk. He Yen smiled and sat down again. Actually, this little one heard that among the servants who were executed at that time, there might be one person who is still alive. He Yen smiled and said, continue. That person is concubine Mother He's wet nurse, Qin Momo. Before concubine Mother He's accident, her wet nurse said that she was going home to see her grandson, but she didn't return to the Fu after some time. Concubine Mother He sent people to check, but that wet nurse's family said that she didn't return. After that, the Fu also looked for her, but there was no news. Fu Wang said, this little one thinks that Qin Momo might still be alive. He Yen looked at him without speaking. Fu Wang was a bit uneasy, Gongzi. Since you said that no one can find Qin Momo now, He Yen wasn't in a hurry, slowly saying, then little brother might not be able to find her either. A person who has disappeared without a trace, even if she's still alive in this world, without any news, what value does she have? Fu Wang was inwardly shocked. Could it be that the person in front of him had the ability to read minds? He did find out a bit of Qin Momo's whereabouts, and he had spent a large amount of money to get this information. However, this transaction today was done by him wanting to use the other party, and the other party could leave at any time. If he couldn't show full sincerity, he was afraid that this person wouldn't meet him in the future. Thinking of this, Fu Wang steeled his heart. This little one heard that this Qin Momo has been a widow for a long time. When she was the wet nurse for concubine Mother she had a lover. Other people don't know about this, only a servant girl in the Fu who boils water knows. That lover now lives outside the city. This little one wants to give it a try. Perhaps Qin Momo is still alive. That's more like it. He Yan's heart calmed down a bit, and there was a bit of praise in his tone. My eyes were right. Little brother is really amazing. Other people couldn't find out, but you found out. She said, then I'll wait here for good news. If little brother finds out Qin Momo's whereabouts, you must not act rashly and alert the enemy. Just secretly tell me. She said, after this matter, this one can help little brother get rid of his slave status. At that time, you just need to take a large amount of money and leave Shuajing. In the future, you will naturally be able to sit back and relax. These words made Fu Wang's heart beat faster. I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't accompany little brother any longer. He Yen stood. Little brother can stay here and drink tea and eat snacks before going back. Gongzi, wait. Fu Wang's voice came from behind him. He Yen just turned around when he felt that someone was already in front of him, trying to lift his curtain hat. But in the next moment, that hand was easily clamped down by He Yen. Fu Wang, ouch, ouch, ouch. He Yen released his hand and continued to walk forward without looking back. He only said, little brother, if you want to see my face, you don't have to be in a hurry. When the dust settles, I will take off my veiled hat. The door was closed, and the elegant room was empty. It was as if the spy just now was just a dream. Only the 2 teacups on the table indicated that someone had been here. Fu Wang sat down at the table and drank tea to suppress the fear in his heart. This mysterious person who knew the Su family like the back of his hand, what was his identity? After leaving the tea room, He Yan's mood was much more relaxed. Under the curtain hat, a smile gradually spread. He didn't expect that Fu Wang's side would be so smooth. The people who had witnessed the truth in the courtyard had really survived. Since that Qin Mama could predict that Su Zhiheng would kill people to silence them, she must be a smart person. Smart people who ran for their lives might have some trump cards on them. Su Zhiheng had calculated everything, but he probably didn't expect that Qin Mama would run away. After all, her children and grandchildren were in Jing. If she ran away, the Su family wouldn't let her family go. But Su Zhiheng also missed one point. When people faced death, no one wouldn't be afraid. The desire to survive was greater than anything else. In this world, there would be people who would sacrifice themselves to protect their family, and there would also be selfish people who would run for their lives in the face of disaster. And with Qin Mama running away, her family would be safer. If Su Zhiheng took the lives of her children and grandchildren, it was possible that Qin Mama would tell the truth to the world in revenge. If she disappeared without a trace, Su Zhiheng would be more cautious. She had to find Qin Mama faster than Su Zhiheng and He Rufei. Today's matter had gone smoothly. He Yan was happy and returned home a bit early. Before he reached the courtyard, he heard a familiar voice. "Younger sister, where did that older brother he go? You really don't know?" When Bai Gua stood up, she only reached his waist. She looked up and answered, "Second young master didn't let us ask about young master he." Lin Shuanghe closed his fan. "Your second young master is quite thoughtful." He Yan called out to him from afar, "Brother Lin." Lin Shuanghe turned his head. When he saw her, his eyes immediately lit up. He quickly walked over. "I just got here and was wondering why you weren't here. You came back just in time." "Brother He, I came especially to find you." He Yan hadn't seen him since returning to Shuajing. Lin Shuanghe was dressed much more ostentatiously than when he was in the Yangzhou Guard. He was still wearing his clothes when he was in the military camp. Now that he was back in Shuajing, even the red-crowned crane eyes on his clothes were embellished with tiny gemstones. He wore fragrant balls and jade belts. Not a single one was missing. "Brother Lin, have you found a residence?" He Yan was still thinking about the matter he had asked this person to do. Unexpectedly, as soon as he said this, Lin Shuanghe choked. It was clear that he had long forgotten about this matter. He laughed awkwardly. "A residence, it hasn't been easy to find recently. I want to find a satisfactory one for Brother He. Naturally, I can't be careless. And, I'm here for other matters. Let's go inside and talk." He Yan was speechless. He led Lin Shuanghe inside. After closing the door, Lin Shuanghe walked around the room and sighed. "Not bad. Isn't this residence right next to Huaijin? I think it's better than the Yangzhou Guard. Younger sister He, are you living well here? If there's anything inconvenient, don't hesitate to tell Huaijin. Don't let yourself suffer." He spoke as if this wasn't the Shao family, but the Lin family. He Yan poured him a cup of hot water. "Brother Lin, you didn't come to find me just to see how I'm living, right?" "Oh." Lin Shuanghe slapped his head. "I almost forgot." He took out an invitation from his sleeve and handed it to He Yan. "An invitation to the palace banquet. Here. Huaijin has left the city. I'm afraid he won't be able to make it back on that day. Before he left, he had someone tell me to remember to take care of you. In 3 days, I'll come to the Shao residence to pick you up. At that time, you'll come with me to the palace. This is your first time entering the palace. If no one leads you, I'm afraid it won't be very convenient." He Yan was startled. "The governor has left the city?" "Yes, he left the city today. He left in a hurry and had his people bring me a message. Originally, he planned to bring you with him to the palace banquet. However, he won't be able to make it back in time this time, so he asked me to do it for him." He Yan recalled that Xiao Ju had indeed told him that she would be leaving the city in a few days. However, he hadn't expected it to be so hurried that he didn't even have time to say goodbye. However, he really kept his promise. He said he would bring him to the palace banquet, and he really did. What are you thinking about, younger sister? He. Lin Shuanghe waved his hand in front of her face. When I came today, I even brought some clothes. When you go to the palace, you have to wear something more glamorous. You don't know how the people in the palace treat dishes according to the plate. You might have to walk around the palace often in the future. The first time you go, you have to leave a deep impression. I had the servants buy these. Each piece is made of good material and is very gorgeous. You can choose one to wear. It won't be a disgrace to hygiene. He Yen. Thank you very much. Also, younger sister I reckon that since Huijin brought you to the palace this time, His Majesty might reward you greatly. After all, you have done a lot of meritorious service in the past. Don't be too surprised if you become an official or something. That, I'll just say it first. It's not certain. He rambled on about a bunch of things to pay attention to at the palace banquet. When the servant came to urge him to hurry to the next social event, he stood up and bid farewell. After Lin Shuanghe left, He Yen sat down in front of the mirror. The clothes he had the servants bring were on the table. They were new and tidy, and the embroidery was exquisite. He Yen looked at himself in the mirror. In her previous life, before she entered the palace, she had already returned to her female identity. Therefore, the person who entered the palace was He Rufei, the person who met His Majesty was He Rufei, and the person who received the title of Feihong was also He Rufei. Now, she was finally going to enter the palace again as He Yen. Thinking about it, Su Zhiheng and He Rufei would both be present at the palace banquet this time. Perhaps she would even see He Yuanliang and He Yuansheng. Those people who had been entangled with her in her previous life had finally reappeared in front of her, and in such a way. The girl in the mirror had already changed her face. Her facial features were not the least bit similar to before. Only that pair of eyes were burning with a raging flame, as if they wanted to burn all evil to ashes. They were as bright as ever. He Yen lowered her head, not knowing what to think. After a while, she slowly raised the corners of her mouth and smiled. 3 days later, He Rufei, Su Zhiheng, and the He family would get to know the name He Yen again. When they met an old friend who had passed away, they didn't know if they had a guilty conscience. When they heard this name again, would they be so scared that they wouldn't be able to sleep at night? Perhaps it was a good thing that Xiao Ju wasn't around. She could be even more fearless. Chapter 199. Night shrouded the wilderness. In the thatched hut, someone was hiding in the corner. His lips were moving, but no one knew what he was saying. Young master, we found them. Su Jingfu's men are chasing after them. These 2 brothers are a bit delirious now. We might have to bring them back to the city for young Master Lin to take a look. Wanning stood beside Xiao Ju and said in a low voice. These were the survivors of the Battle of Mingshui. In the Battle of Mingshui, Xiao Zhongwu's soldiers were almost completely annihilated. Among them, apart from Chai Anshi, no one else survived. And the soldiers who were still alive also died one after another. As for how they died and whether there was anything strange about their deaths, no one cared anymore. It had been 5 years since the Battle of Mingshui. Perhaps in this world, apart from Xiao Zhongwu's son, no one would care about the dead General Guangwu and the sinister plot hidden in that famous defeat. Is there no other way? Xiao Ju frowned. Like this, I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on until we return to the city. When we came out, we were in a hurry and only brought medicine for injuries. We didn't bring anything to calm the mind. Wanning shook her head. Su Jingfu's men chased them for 7 days and 7 nights. They didn't sleep and didn't rest, so they couldn't hold on. Of course, a war of attrition was very tiring, especially a war of attrition like this. Xiao Ju thought for a moment and took a sachet from his waist. It was the sachet made by Bai Rongwei that He Yen gave him. He held the sachet and pulled open the string. Inside, there was a very small protective talisman and some medicinal herbs. According to He Yan, it was very important to focus the mind. Xiao Ju poured out the medicinal herbs and gave them to Wanning. Let them smell it. We won't leave tonight. Let them rest for a night in another place. Wanning agreed. After investigating Su Jingfu and the Mingshui case for so long, they finally found 2 living witnesses. It wasn't easy. But this also showed that Xiao Ju's ability had gradually grown to the point where he could compete with Su Jingfu. For example, this time, he won the kidnapping. He couldn't stay here for long. He had to find another place. After finding a house outside the city, everyone, including the 2 delirious brothers, settled down. Qi Wu and Fei Nu stood guard in front of the brothers' door to prevent any accidents during the night. Wanning went out to scout for information. Nights in the suburbs were always exceptionally cold and cheerless. Especially during autumn, when there was rarely any sign of human habitation within a dozen li radius. The moon was white and bright, shining down on the empty wilderness like flowing silver water, giving rise to a sense of desolation for no reason. Actually, he didn't like the Mid-Autumn Festival. This was because the Mid-Autumn Festival always reminded him of very bad memories of the past. The more perfect the moon was, the lonelier it seemed. Every year around this time, he would find it hard to fall asleep. In the past, when he was in the barracks, he could read documents for half the night. Now that he was back in Shuajing, there was nothing he could do. Xiao Ju lowered her head and looked at the sachet in her hand. The medicinal herbs in the sachet had been emptied, leaving only a flat layer. The protective talisman was small. After thinking for a while, he opened the sachet, intending to put the protective talisman back in. Although it was embroidered by a servant of the Shao family, the silk material and patterns were personally chosen by Bai Rongwei. Bai Rongwei was always very persistent on this matter, so the sachet was especially exquisite. Her fingers touched it, and the silk was as cold as moonlight. Xiao Ju's gaze paused for a moment. In the next moment, her fingertips brushed against the inside of the sachet, touching a rough protrusion. This protrusion on the smooth surface of the sachet was particularly different. She lowered her eyes and turned the sachet over. The inside appeared in front of Xiao Ju. The inside of the sachet was embroidered with 2 layers. It was a double-layer embroidery, and the inner layer was a normal black cloth without any patterns. However, at this moment, there was a crooked, bright yellow horn embroidered on the inner layer. It was impossible to tell what it was, but it could be seen that the embroiderer's skill was not very good. The thread was not even cut clean. How to say it, the black python outside the sachet and the yellow horn inside the sachet did not seem to be the same thing. What did this mean? Xiao Ju raised an eyebrow. Bai Rongwei's skill was much better than this. If the Shao family's servants' needlework looked like this, it would be a bit scary if word got out. This sachet was given to him by He Yan. In the entire Shao family, other than Lady He, there was no one else who could make needlework like this. He turned the sachet over and over again, trying to find traces of other things that He Yan embroidered. However, there was nothing. Other than this yellow horn, she did not embroider anything else. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. Was she using his sachet to practice her skills? She also practiced it so sneakily and silently. If he did not need to take the herbs inside to open the sachet, he was afraid that he would never discover the secret inside. But what was the point of doing this? If she really wanted to practice, she could find a white handkerchief and embroider it endlessly, hiding it inside. He always felt that there was a deeper meaning that he did not understand. Just at this time, in the wilderness, there was the sound of footsteps. A 12 or 13-year-old boy walked up to him and said with a smile, "Young master." This child was Wan Ying's son, called by Xian. He had handsome features and looked very similar to Wan Ying. However, he was young and his cheeks were a bit chubby, making him look simple and honest and cute. Unlike Wan Ying's cold temperament, Bai Xian was like any other boy his age. He was naive and even a bit talkative. He liked Xiao Zhu very much. No matter how many times Wanning warned him not to be impudent, Bai Xian did not remember. Xiao Zhu did not care about these things. Therefore, whenever Wanning did not look, Bai Xian would try to find a way to stick to Xiao Zhu whenever he saw her. Bai Xian saw the sachet in Xiao Zhu's hands. His eyes were good. In the darkness, he could see the embroidery on the cloth clearly. He blurted out, "Eh. This moon embroidery is so beautiful." "Moon?" Xiao Zhu was stunned. Bai Xian answered confidently, "Young master, look. It's yellow and curved. It's the moon." He moved closer and stood on his tiptoes to observe the embroidery in Xiao Zhu's hands. He praised, "This is a black lining. It represents the night. This moon is embroidered on it. It represents the moon in the night. Young master, you are the moon in the night. You are the moon in the night. Dazzling, dazzling." The more the child spoke, the more excited he became. He whispered mysteriously, "Young master, is this a gift from Miss?" Xiao Zhu was speechless. He was a bit uncomfortable and took back the sachet. "No. How could it not be?" Bai Xian was very confused. If it wasn't a girl, how could a man embroider such exquisite embroidery? Xiao Zhu wondered if Bai Xian was He Yan's biological brother. It was rare that they had the same evaluation of beauty. Bai Xian wanted to ask more, but a voice suddenly exploded behind him. "Bai Xian." Bai Xian was so scared that he quickly hid behind Xiao Zhu. "Mother. I came out to use the toilet and just happened to see young master." Wanning grabbed him by the ear and pulled him out from behind Xiao Zhu. "How many times have I told you not to disturb young master? Why is this child so immature?" "Young master, I'm sorry. I'll take him back now." Wanning carried the white pheasant back, leaving Xiao Zhu alone in the wilderness. The moonlight shone on the black wilderness. The soil was covered with white frost. It was like the snow by the Wei River in Liang province, pouring into the cold. The emotionless moon was like a dream. He curved his lips and turned to leave. Suddenly, he paused as if he thought of something and looked up. In his memory, there was a girl whose face was hidden under a mask in the midst of a lively and laughing crowd. She was chatting nonchalantly on a high platform. The last secret. She stood on her tiptoes and leaned close to his chin. She said softly, "I like the moon." The moon doesn't know. The day of entering the palace arrived quickly. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei also wanted to enter the palace. When they found out that He Yan didn't go with them, but with Lin Shuanghe, they were a bit surprised. However, they were very considerate and didn't ask much. When Lin Shuanghe's carriage arrived, they sent He Yan to the carriage and told him to meet again in the palace. Lin Shuanghe sat in the carriage and waved his fan. "Huaijin is probably afraid that you won't get along with Brother Ruby. We're all old friends, so it'll be easier for us to get along." He looked at He Yan again and sighed. "It's Huaijin's loss that he didn't come back today. Our He Mimi looks so handsome in such gorgeous men's clothing. If you go to the palace with me, no one among the civil and military officials will be able to steal our light." He Yan was thinking about other things and gave a perfunctory reply. Lin Shuanghe saw this scene and thought that she was nervous because it was her first time entering the palace. He comforted her. "Don't be afraid, He Mimi. I'm here. I'm very familiar with the palace. You can do whatever you want. As long as you don't kill or set fire, you can find my grandfather to settle it." He was already very good at setting up his father and grandfather, so he brought He Yan along as well. The carriage sped along. After an unknown amount of time, they finally arrived at the palace gates. The imperial bodyguards in front of the palace were already very familiar with Lin Shuanghe's carriage. Lin Shuanghe and He Yan got off the carriage and followed the palace attendant inside. This was He Yan's first time entering the palace. If it was at this time in her previous life, she would be nervous because she could see the emperor and be rewarded. But after dying once, she knew that the so-called future and riches were fleeting clouds. She didn't enter the palace for the future, but for a debt from her previous life. Bypassing the palace's long corridor and garden, they walked past the front hall. The emperor's banquet this time was nothing more than a celebration. The people who came were all important people in the imperial court. For example, Lin Shuanghe could also sneak in because of his relationship with Lin Qingtan and Lin Mu. In the front hall, there were already many people. He Yan looked around and didn't see Xiao Jing and his wife's shadow. Lin Shuanghe said in a low voice, "We took the shortcut. Brother Ruby should have taken the main road, so he might be a bit late." "It's okay, He Yan. I'll follow you. When someone comes to greet you, I'll tell them your name. It'll help you get to know some people." As soon as he finished speaking, someone said, "Lin Shuanghe." However, this person didn't come to get to know He Yan, because this person was Yan He. Yan He was wearing his official robe. The woman standing next to him was elegant and gentle. Her appearance couldn't be considered stunning, but it was very pleasant to look at. She bowed from Lin Shuanghe. "Young Master Lin." This was Yan He's wife, Xia Qingxiu. Qingxiu was a person who did things as he pleased. Under everyone's gaze, he put his arm around Xia Qingxiu's shoulder and pouted at He Yan. "Qingxiu, this is the confidant I told you about. He hates He Rufei as much as I do. However, he's now Xiao Huijin's man." He looked at He Yan. "Do you want to work for me?" Before He Yan could speak, Lin Shuanghe waved his hand righteously. "No. Of course, this kind of thing has to be faithful to the end. How can you change people halfway through?" Yan He was confused. "You have to be faithful to the end? Could it be that you're such a fickle person in your heart?" Lin Shuanghe looked at Xia Qingxiu. "Sister-in-law, I'm worried about you." Xia Qingxiu, Yan He was furious. "Lin Shuanghe, shut up. How can you sow discord like this?" "Lin Shuanghe, it's good that you know." Yan He cursed and left with Xia Qingxiu. Lin Shuanghe heaved a sigh of relief. He turned his head and was about to ask He Yan, but he saw that He Yan was staring blankly in a direction. Lin Shuanghe followed her gaze and saw that not far away, there were people talking. Standing in the middle was a young man in a long robe. He was refined and handsome. He was no stranger. This was the Hanlin Academy scholar, Su Zhiheng. Lin Shuanghe was a little puzzled. He Yan was staring at Su Zhiheng. Those who didn't know better would think that she had taken a liking to him. However, Su Zhiheng was already married. Moreover, in terms of refinement and handsome, Chu Zhao wasn't bad either. Compared to Chu Zhao, Su Zhiheng was far inferior. Could it be that she couldn't get Chu Zhao and was looking for a substitute? Lin Shuanghe's mind was a mess. On the other side, Su Zhiheng seemed to have noticed that someone was looking at him. He followed the gaze and looked over. He Yan was a stranger here. Su Zhiheng had never seen her before, but he recognized Lin Shuanghe. Lin Shuanghe didn't have an official position. Lin Qingtan and Lin Muji were good at conducting themselves in the imperial court. Most of the officials in the imperial court were on good terms with the Lin family. At least, they wouldn't take the initiative to make enemies. Seeing that Lin Shuanghe was also looking at him, Su Zhiheng was a little surprised at first. Then, he temporarily left his colleagues who were talking to him and walked over to Lin Shuanghe. "Brother Lin." He stopped in front of Lin Shuanghe and said warmly, "Long time no see." Lin Shuanghe recognized Su Zhiheng, but they were just acquaintances. They weren't familiar with each other. However, he was a shrewd person. He took advantage of the situation and said, "Yes, I went to Liangzhou for a while. Our Shuajing is still the best." "Oh right, this is a brother I met in Liangzhou." He Yan raised her eyes to look at Su Zhiheng. It had been more than 2 years since she last saw Su Zhiheng. In her memory, Su Zhiheng was a gentle and considerate man. At the very least, he was a handsome young master with a face that could completely deceive people. Now that she looked at him again, she didn't know if it was because the face reflected the heart, but Su Zhiheng's face had become a lot harsher. He had lost a lot of weight. His official's robe was already loose, so it made him look even more stooped. Because he was too thin and weak, his face also looked a little old. Even the smile he deliberately squeezed out looked exceptionally stiff. Su Zhiheng was also sizing up the person in front of him. This was a very delicate and pretty young man. His eyebrows were full of heroic spirit. His red round-necked robe made his lips red and his teeth white. A black belt around his waist outlined his extremely beautiful figure. The most attractive thing was his eyes. They were clearly gentle, but his gaze was sharp. This young man had been staring at him from afar. It was clearly the first time they had met, but his gaze seemed to surge with all kinds of emotions. It was cold and gloomy, as if he could see through all of his disguises. He couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Su Zhiheng felt uncomfortable being stared at like this. He turned to Lin Shuanghe. "This is, Lord Su, don't look at this little brother's young age. He has already been personally conferred the title of Muan Lang by Her Majesty. His name is He Yan. In the future, he will be our colleague." Su Zhiheng originally had a smile on his face as he listened to Lin Shuanghe's words. When he heard the last part, his smile disappeared in a flash. He asked, "You said, what is his name?" "Lord Su." He Yan looked at him with a smile. "This one is called He Yan. He as in He Miao, and Yan as in He Qinghai." Su Zhiheng's expression changed greatly. The corners of the young man's lips were slightly raised. He looked friendly and inexperienced. However, when he looked carefully at his eyes, there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile. It was like a pool of ice-cold water that brought people to an afternoon when a young woman was struggling to fall into a bottomless abyss. The oppressive feeling of suffocation rose up his throat. His throat was dry, and he couldn't say a complete sentence. Fortunately, at this time, someone called Lin Shuanghe's name. It was Lin Qingtan. Lin Shuanghe dragged He Yan away. He said, "Brother He, that's my grandfather. I'll take you to see him." The person in front of him left. Su Zhiheng almost suspected that the name he had just heard was a dream, caused by his uneasiness. However, when he looked up, the young man standing beside Lin Shuanghe in the distance and talking to Lin Qingtan, reminded him that this was reality. There really was a person called He Yan in front of him. Su Zhiheng was drenched in cold sweat. A colleague noticed his abnormality and asked with concern, "Lord Su, what's the matter? Why is your face so ugly? Are you not feeling well?" Su Zhiheng forced a smile and waved his hand. "It's nothing." He turned and walked to an empty corner, not daring to let others see his shock. He curled his fingers and did his best to convince himself. So what if he was called He Yan? In this world, there were many people with the same name. Young Mistress Su was already dead. He had personally seen her being sealed into a coffin. This He Yan was a man. Moreover, he didn't look very old, so it shouldn't match. But that young man called He Yan, the way he stared at him, made Su Zhiheng's back crawl with chills when he thought about it. Indifference, hatred, mockery, and in an instant, it turned into a smile as if he had seen through everything. Moreover, he had said those words. When he first saw He Yan, or rather, when he first saw He Yan with his real name, that girl was wearing a skirt and said rather uncomfortably, "My surname is He, first name is Yan. He as in He Miao, Yan as in He Qinghai." Su Zhiheng closed his eyes. How could there be such a coincidence? How could such a coincidence happen in front of him? This was really, He Yan, who was not far away, saw his uneasiness and sneered in his heart. Wang Ba always said that if one walked in the dark for too long, they would encounter ghosts. He originally thought that this person was too timid, but now it seemed that his words were not without reason. For example, Sun Ling and his son in Liangzhou city had committed countless evil deeds. Countless women had died in their hands, but they were still afraid of evil spirits coming for their lives, so they filled their courtyard with Buddha statues and divine talismans. Lin Shuanghe was very popular. Wherever he went, he couldn't help but exchange greetings with people. He Yen followed beside him, matching the positions of these people with their faces. Where they were, what they were doing. When the battlefield changed to the imperial court, the general would never fight an unprepared battle. At this moment, someone shouted, "General Feihong is here, General Feihong is here." The officials present quieted down and looked in the direction of the outer gate. It had to be said that the two great generals of the Great Wei, Fei Hong and Feng Yun, were always eye-catching no matter the time. Today, Xiao Ju couldn't come, so He Rufei was the only eye-catching person. Yan He, who was standing at the side, snorted and said disdainfully, "He's not the emperor. Is there a need to put on such airs?" Xia Chengxiu tugged at his sleeve, and Yan He stopped talking. He Yen followed the crowd and looked in the direction of the outer gate. Following the palace servant's lead, someone walked in. This man was wearing the official robes of a military general. He was quite handsome and had the unique style and roughness of a military general. When someone greeted him, he would nod in response. He seemed to be friendly, but he also maintained a sense of alienation. This bit of estrangement made this General Feihong seem even more mysterious. Tisk, He Yen heard Lin Shuanghe say, "This kid was quite cute when he was young. Why is he becoming more and more unlikable as he grows? How is he different from those old fellows who have been in the bureaucracy for many years?" He added softly, "The bureaucracy is a big dye-vat. Fortunately, I'm not an official." This was the first time He Yen saw He Rufei like this in front of his colleagues in court. With the name of General Feihong, he lived like a fish in water without any burden. It was as if he was General Feihong from start to finish. He Yen felt disgusted. Perhaps it was because his gaze was too focused that He Rufei also seemed to sense it and looked towards him. The moment their eyes met, He Yen turned his head and spoke to Lin Shuanghe. He Rufei only saw an unfamiliar youth standing next to Lin Shuanghe. Maybe it was his imagination. He Rufei didn't take it to heart and found a good colleague to sit with. Of course, he got to know his good colleagues after he took off his mask. In the past, he had nothing to do with them. As for Su Zhiheng, in front of outsiders, they weren't close. Everyone knew that He Rufei and He Xining were very close as siblings. However, towards this brother-in-law of theirs, they could only be considered as friends of a gentleman. After all, one was a civil official while the other was a military official. Even if they wanted to be intimate, there was nothing they could talk about. He Yen knew this wasn't the case. They were just people with a guilty conscience. They were afraid of being caught, so they did it on purpose. It seemed that they were very afraid of that matter being discovered. The more afraid they were, the more confident He Yen was. Lin Shuanghe said, "Let's sit down first." The men and women had to sit separately. However, there were very few women at this kind of palace banquet. Other than the madams that the Empress Dowager liked and their daughters, there was no one else. After some time, an eunuch came in to announce that Emperor Wenxuan had arrived. Chapter 200. This was the first time He Yen saw Emperor Wenxuan in his previous life. Emperor Wenxuan had reached the age of knowing his destiny, but he looked younger than he actually was. His face was ruddy, and he was neat and tidy. Although he wore a bright yellow dragon robe, he did not look as majestic and domineering as He Yen had imagined. He even looked kind and benevolent, like a kind elder in an ordinary family. He did not put on airs. After arriving, he sat down in the high seat, indicating that the officials did not need to be reserved. Sitting next to Emperor Wenxuan was Empress Xiang. Empress Xiang and Emperor Wenxuan were husband and wife when they were young. Their family was prominent, and the late emperor made her the crown princess. Empress Xiang had a son and a daughter, the current crown prince Guang Yan and Princess Yu Chan. Princess Yu Chan was already married, but she was not feeling well recently, so she did not come to the palace banquet today. Sitting next to Empress Xiang was Imperial Concubine Lan. Imperial Concubine Lan was about the same age as Empress Xiang, but she was not as beautiful and round as Empress Xiang. She looked thin and delicate. She was gentle and did not fight for anything, so she gave birth to the fourth Prince Guang Shua. Fifth Prince Guang Ji was held by a nanny and stood next to his two brothers. His biological mother was Imperial Concubine Ni. Imperial Concubine Ni was very young and was at the age where she was as beautiful as a flower. She was arrogant and domineering. She was originally selected as the legitimate daughter of a local official, but because she was pregnant with the emperor's child, she rose up the ranks. However, Emperor Wenxuan disliked her arrogance and refused to promote her to the position of imperial concubine. In the past 2 years, Imperial Concubine Ni had become more well-behaved. The second prince and the third prince were originally a pair of twins. Emperor Wenxian was lucky enough to meet a palace maid who washed clothes in the palace. Unfortunately, it was difficult to give birth to twins. When the mother and the children were born, all three of them died together. Emperor Wenxuan did not have many children. In an imperial family, having many children was not necessarily a good thing. There was only one position, and when there were many people, it was inevitable that some people would be dissatisfied and disloyal. Now that fifth Prince Guang Ji was still young, only Crown Prince Guang Ji and fourth Prince Guang Shua had the ability to sit in that position. Empress Zhang's family was powerful, and the crown prince was the legitimate heir. Coincidentally, the concubine Lan did not fight for the throne. Originally, it was understandable that the crown prince would inherit the throne. However, the crown prince was a Guang Yan with neither talent nor virtue. He had no achievements in political affairs, and his own household was a mess. Usually, he only knew how to play around. In contrast, the fourth prince was a Guang Yan with both talent and virtue. He had outstanding talent, a gentle temperament, and kept himself clean. The crown prince was so weak, and the fourth prince was so outstanding. Naturally, there were people who were tempted. Moreover, among the 3,000 beauties in the imperial harem, Emperor Wenxian loved concubine Lan the most. Although concubine Lan did not fight or snatch, no one in the imperial harem dared to look down on her. Gradually, the power in the imperial court was divided into two factions. One faction supported the Guang Yan, while the other faction wanted to ask Emperor Wenxian to make Guang Shua the crown prince. He Yan still remembered that when he was in Liangzhou, he vaguely heard people say that the crown prince did not like Xiaoju. Xiaoju led the troops to the Liangzhou guard. In addition to avoiding Su Jingfu's sharp edge, the crown prince also played a part in it. In other words, Su Jingfu and the crown prince Guang Yan were most likely in cahoots. She thought in her heart, but her expression did not change. Fifth Prince Guang Ji was only 5 years old this year. Emperor Wenxian disliked noble Lady Ni for being arrogant and leading a good child astray. Thus, he gave him to concubine Lan and let concubine Lan raise him together. Noble Lady Ni was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing she could do. Guang Ji had been raised by noble Lady Lan for a long time, so he was very close to Guang Shua. At this moment, he was sitting at the table, tugging on Guang Shua's sleeve and whispering, "Fourth brother, Imperial Father said today that he has a happy occasion to announce." "What is it?" Guang Shua smiled and looked at him. "I don't know either. You'll find out later." Guang Yan, who overheard their conversation, sneered, "Fourth brother, Imperial Father likes you so much. I thought you knew all of his secrets. Why, didn't he tell you in advance this time?" Guang Shua did not take the crown prince's provocation to heart. His attitude was still gentle. "Your Highness must be joking." Naturally, the undercurrent on their side was noticed by those who were observant. Emperor Wenxian was getting older and older. Some things were bound to happen sooner or later. He Yan sat at the men's table. She sat closer to Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Jing, but slightly further away from Yan He. He Rufei sat even further away. She could even feel Su Zhiheng secretly sizing her up. He Yan also saw Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao did not greet her today. He still spoke gently to others, but he treated He Yan like a stranger. He Yan did not care about this, but Chu Zhao seemed a little strange today. Not long after the banquet started, Empress Zhang spoke. She smiled and said, "Today is a good day. It's almost mid-autumn. I want to take advantage of today to do something good." Everyone looked at each other. They thought about the battle between the Rundu and Jiang. De Wei defeated Yudo. Today was supposed to be a celebratory banquet, but the main character, Xiao Huijin, was not present. If they were to reward He Rufei, then He Rufei's contribution in the Battle of Hua Yuan was not outstanding. If they were to reward him now, not only would it not make people feel honored, it would also be insulting. Shi Jinbo, Empress Zhang smiled and said, "It's time for the fourth young master of your residence to get married." Chu Linfeng was stunned. He stood up and quickly said, "Yes." Chu Zhao also stood up. "Chu Xilan, I know that you and Lord Su's daughter, Ping Ting, have been Qing Mei's childhood sweetheart. I watched Ping Ting grow up. I also like you very much. The two of you are a match made in heaven. Today, I will do this good deed and betroth Ping Ting to you. What do you think?" Su Pingting was not at the banquet today. Only Chu Zhao heard this and knelt down. "Thank you for your favor, Your Majesty. I am very grateful." Su Jingfu also smiled and accepted the decree. He bowed and expressed his thanks. The banquet instantly became lively. The surrounding people also took the opportunity to express their thanks to Chu Linfeng and Su Jingfu. Chu Linfeng was very proud. He had 4 sons. The other 3 were average in appearance and talent. There was nothing special about them. Only this son, whose birth mother came from a small city, was stunning and outstanding. He was even able to become in-laws with the Prime Minister. If this news were to spread, he would be very proud. Chu Zhao also smiled and expressed his thanks. However, He Yan saw the smile on his face. He was not happy. Although she had not spent much time with Chu Zhao, this person often had a smile on his face. But now, even the fake smile was not as real as before. "Pitiful," Lin Shuanghe murmured in a low voice. At this time, one sentence is determined for life. He is no different from a puppet. He Yan turned to look at him. Lin Shuanghe knew that he had misspoken and hurriedly said with a smile, "Brother He, the Empress has said that the two of them are Qing Mei's childhood sweethearts. Naturally, they should be together." He Yan did not say anything. Chu Zhao and Su Jingfu's relationship. Although they were teacher and student, Chu Zhao often had to rely on Su Jingfu to do things. Since he had chosen this path, he had to give up something. For example, freedom. Everyone had their own choices. She felt sympathy for Chu Zhao's situation, but wasn't this also Chu Zhao's own decision? Because of this happy event, the banquet was no longer as formal and lively as before. Seeing this, Emperor Wenxuan smiled and said, "Since this is the case, Jin will also do a good deed today." Everyone at the banquet was shocked. What did this mean? Could it be that there was another happy event? Could it be that they were going to witness 2 happy events today? Since His Majesty and the Empress had personally bestowed a marriage, it could not be a small figure. Guang Ji's eyes lit up as he looked at Guang Shuo. "Fourth brother, who are you bestowing a marriage to this time?" The Crown Prince also felt that it was strange. He knew about the matter between Su Pingting and Chu Xilan. The Crown Prince felt that it was a pity that Su Pingting, that girl, was born beautiful. However, he also knew that he already had a crown princess, and Su Jingfu definitely would not let his daughter be a secondary consort. As for Chu Xilan, he also needed to win over him. Therefore, he could only let Su Pingting benefit that brat Chu Xilan. Now, he had not received any news about the person Emperor Wenxuan was bestowing a marriage. Where is He Yan of the Liangzhou guards? As soon as these words came out, everyone at the banquet was shocked. Lin Shuanghe looked at He Yan in surprise. How? He Yan was not worried at all. He stood up and walked forward confidently. He knelt down and kowtowed to Emperor Wenxuan. This commoner He Yan greets His Majesty. Emperor Wenxuan smiled and said, You are Muan Lang that Zhen has personally bestowed upon you. How can you call yourself a commoner? He Yan said, This humble subject knows his mistake. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei, who were at the banquet, heard this name and looked at the youth in the hall at the same time. Yan He frowned and muttered to himself, What is going on now? Chu Zhao secretly clenched the teacup in his hand. On the other side, Shen Muxue, who was at the female side of the banquet, lowered her head. Her expression was dark and gloomy. Guang Ji asked, Who is this older brother? Guang Shui shook his head. The name He Yan was too unfamiliar. They had never seen this youth before. Only Muan Lang had some impression. He seemed to be Xiao Ju's subordinate when they were at the Liangzhou guards. He was someone who had performed meritorious deeds together with Xiao Ju. Zhen knows that you went to Jiyang and the Runde with General Fengyun. You were also there when Rida Muzi attacked the Liangzhou guards. The Jiyang water battle and the Runde defense were all your ideas. It is not easy for you to be brave and resourceful at such a young age. Zhen thinks that Muan Lang is not enough for you. Why don't I give you the title of Marquis? In the future, you will be Marquis Wuan, this. The courtiers looked at each other in dismay. From a nameless kid to a marquis, he did not have any important people behind him to recommend him. What kind of spectacle was this? Even General Fei Hong back then had someone in his family who was an official. What was this kid's background? How could he be so powerful? They did not see the memorials. Naturally, they did not know how the memorials from Jiyang and the Runde detailed He Yan's crucial role in the battle. Emperor Wenxian was a person who liked talents, especially young talents. This made him think of those geniuses in poetry and literature. To geniuses, the world and rules were restraints. This humble subject thanks your majesty for your grace. He Yan knelt down. His heart was extremely calm. What kind of luck did this kid have? Yan He gulped down the tea in his teacup and said gloomily, He rose faster than me. Lin Shuanghe was truly happy for He Yan. His face was about to burst into laughter. You can't. At this time, an abrupt voice interrupted. He Yan turned his head. An unfamiliar face appeared at the male side of the banquet. He Yan had never seen this person before. He did not look old and was wearing an official's robe. This man's face showed impatience. He lifted the corner of his robe and walked forward. He also knelt down in front of Emperor Wenxian. Your Majesty, you cannot confer him the marquis position. This kid is a liar. She is not a man, she is a woman. As if these words were not shocking enough, this person raised his hand and pulled out the wooden hairpin that bound He Yan's hair. Immediately, a head of long hair flowed down. They clearly had the same eyebrows and eyes, but at this moment, they were as elegant and beautiful as a woman. The youth knelt in the hall. His expression was extremely calm, without a hint of panic. On the other hand, the surrounding crowd was like boiling water. They instantly became rowdy. What's going on? Is she really a woman? Didn't they say she was a Liang province guard? There are women in the Liang province guard. Is she really a woman? This is the crime of deceiving the monarch. At the banquet, Chu Zhao's gaze focused on the young girl's back. The hands hidden in his sleeves secretly clenched into fists. Yan He could not hold back. He stood up with a whoosh and shouted, How is this possible? When Lin Shuanghe heard that person say, no, he already had a bad feeling. When he said, woman, he almost blacked out. However, he still persisted. At this moment, if he was not careful, he would be labeled as an accomplice in the crime of deceiving the monarch. Lin Shuanghe pressed down on his arm, indicating that he should not move. Lin Shuanghe's lips moved. His mind was quickly calculating how to get away with this. Insist that it was only a boy with a feminine appearance? Impossible. At this point, the nannies from the palace only needed to come over for a brief examination to reveal the truth. Should he just say that He Yan's brain was not working well and that he mistook him for a woman and was spouting nonsense? That was not right either. If his brain was not working well, how could he deceive so many people? He had always had a lot of crooked ideas. At this moment, he could not think of a single one. He anxiously scratched his head, not knowing what to do. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei at the banquet, although they were sitting in different positions, when they saw this scene, their hearts could not help but tremble. They almost screamed out loud. Being called He Yan was a coincidence. A woman dressed as a man, entered the army, received meritorious service, and was even conferred the title of Marquis. How could it still be called a coincidence? If there was a next life, it would be like this. Su Zhiheng was very guilty. His body trembled. If Emperor Wen Xian and his entourage were not here, he was afraid that he would immediately run away. This He Yan, who exactly was he? No one expected that a good reward would suddenly appear like this. Emperor Wen Xian looked at He Yan. Muan Lang, what do you say? This humble subject is indeed a woman, He Yan said, Your Majesty is very perceptive. This humble subject does not dare to hide anything. How could he admit it so openly and openly? The courtiers were in an uproar. Shen Muxue sat among the women and stared fixedly at the cup in front of her, as if she did not see this farce. However, if one looked carefully, her fingertips were slightly trembling. Xia Qingxiu sat next to her. Seeing Shen Muxue like this, he was a bit surprised, but he did not say anything. Empress Zhang also did not expect this to happen. A trace of surprise flashed across her face. However, Emperor Wen Xian did not look shocked or angry. He only lowered his head and looked at He Yan. After a while, the emperor's voice sounded in the hall. Actually, I already knew that Muan Lang was a woman. Shen Muxue suddenly raised her head. How could this be? Lin Shuanghe was also stunned. The courtiers were even more at a loss. After so many twists and turns, even watching a show was not as exciting as this. First, he revealed Muan Lang's identity as a woman. Now, the emperor said that he already knew that Muan Lang was a woman. What in the world was going on? Chu Zhao frowned slightly. Suddenly, he looked at Su Jingfu beside him. Su Jingfu had a kind smile on his face. He did not look surprised. Chu Zhao's thoughts flashed. He seemed to have caught a glimpse of something. It was Empress Zhang who opened her mouth and broke the silence. Your Majesty, you mean, the eunuch outside said loudly, General Fengyun has arrived. He Yan's heart skipped a beat. Why would Xiao Ju come? Didn't he leave the city? Wouldn't he come today? Emperor Wen Xian laughed. What's going on? Let beloved official Xiao say it herself. He Yan's heart trembled. This seemed to be different from what she had expected. Why would Xiao Ju be involved in this? She clearly did not mention Xiao Ju at all. Why did Emperor Wen Xian's words mean that it was related to Xiao Ju? Someone walked into the hall. The young governor had changed into a black court robe embroidered with gold. He was beautiful and elegant, like a new willow in spring. He was clearly a martial artist who had fought on the battlefield, but he did not look vulgar at all. He looked like a noble young master from the Shuo capital. The officials here paled in comparison. Shen Muxue stared at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju walked to He Yan's side and knelt down. From the official's point of view, she and He Yan looked like a young couple who were kneeling down to greet their new wedding. Beloved official, you may rise. Emperor Wen Xian glanced at He Yan. Muan Lang, you may rise too. He Yan and Xiao Ju stood up. Lin Shuanghe gripped the fan in his hand so tightly that it almost broke. He knew that since Xiao Zhu had appeared, she would definitely protect him. However, how could he let He Yan escape unscathed? "Miss He is this official's fiancé," he said. "I was afraid that war would be unpredictable in Liangzhou. I could not bear to part with her, so I brought her with me. However, I did not expect Miss He to be so smart and brave. As a woman, she was able to achieve as much as a man. Huaijin did not dare to deceive your majesty. He had already secretly reported the truth to your majesty a long time ago." Emperor Wen Xian laughed loudly, as if he was amused by Xiao Zhu's behavior. He shook his head and sighed. "I always thought that beloved official Xiao would never marry in this lifetime. I did not expect to see the day when the iron tree blossoms. In my opinion, there are not many men in this world who are as deeply in love as beloved official Xiao." He had already secretly reported to Emperor Wen Xian. He Yan was stunned. When did this happen? How could she not know? Even though she was in the palace, she could not help but look at Xiao Zhu. However, the latter's expression was calm and did not reveal any clues. At this moment, a woman's sharp voice cut in. "Liar." Shen Muxue sat on the female side of the banquet. She looked at He Yan with a gaze that was like a thorn, almost piercing through He Yan's entire body. Her voice was not as gentle and sweet as before. It was like a pot of boiling water, sharp and hoarse. "When did military governor Xiao have such a fiancé? Why did we not know?" Everyone in the Shuo capital knew about Shen Muxue. However, when they thought about it, it made sense. When did Xiao Zhu have such a fiancé? Why was there no news at all? Xiao Zhu coldly stared at her. Shen Muxue could not help but shiver. "She is indeed not my fiancé." He Yan was stunned. In the next moment, the young man's cold and slightly deep voice sounded. It carried an unquestionable certainty. "She is the scene in my eyes, the things in my heart, and the person in my heart." Chapter 201. Everyone in Dawei knew that the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, Xiao Zhu, was well-mannered and well-versed in both the pen and the sword. When he picked up a sword, he could ensure the safety of an entire area. When he put down his sword, he was still an elegant young master. The heavens favored him by giving him good looks and good martial arts skills. Unfortunately, he was too cold and ruthless. As for who he would fall in love with, it was just a dream. Not to mention his temperament, he had already grown up to be so powerful. In this world, what kind of woman would he fall in love with? After all, the high and mighty fairy Shen Muxue had followed him for so many years, but she had never gained anything from him. Now, he heard the words "sweetheart" from this person's mouth. He Yan was in a daze. The officials were also in a daze. Even the emperor on the high seat was stunned. It turned out that the famous second young master Xiao could be so gentle when he thought of his sweetheart. It was as if the moonlight had faded away from its coldness and thinness, leaving behind only its clarity and brightness. The autumn moon was like a mirror, reflecting one's thoughts. Happiness or shyness, secrets or sadness, could not be hidden from the eyes of others. No one could remain unmoved when he looked at them with such eyes. He Yan could hear his own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. In the noisy banquet, it was clear and powerful. He was powerless to resist. The emperor's laughter broke the momentary daze. "Ha ha ha, good. It's rare for Zhen to see beloved official Xiao like this. The empress has accomplished a good deed today. Zhen will also accomplish a good deed today. Since the two of you are in love with each other, beloved official Xiao, Zhen can't think of anything to reward you for this great victory in Jiang. Why don't Zhen bestow you a marriage? This Miss He will be your wife. Are you willing?" Xiao Zhu received the decree. "This humble subject thanks your majesty for your grace." He Yan had no choice but to kneel down to receive the decree. Shen Muxue's lips turned pale and she almost fainted. The emperor's words were like gold and jade. Since he had already bestowed the marriage, he would not change it. Lin Shuanghe's heart twisted and turned with the changes in the hall. He was almost scared to death. Now that he was here, he could finally let out a sigh of relief. Even though he was full of doubts, now was not the time to talk. He simply ignored everything and wholeheartedly felt happy for his good friend. He excitedly said to his colleagues, "Did you hear that? The marriage was sanctioned. His Majesty has granted a marriage. This is a good marriage. Look at them, they are so well matched." Yan He had not recovered from the blow that Muan Lang, who spoke ill of He Rufei together with him, was a woman. He actually heard such a big news. For a moment, he was stunned and wondered if he was dreaming. "Congratulations, Military Governor Xiao. Congratulations, Military Governor Xiao. His Majesty's bestowment of marriage is a beautiful story." What was surprising was that Su Jingfu also spoke up for Xiao Ju. Not only did he not look surprised, he seemed to be happy to see it happen. He kept praising how wonderful this marriage was. He Yan thought for a moment and understood. Su Jingfu and Xiao Ju were rivals. With Xiao Ju's status, marrying a woman like her who had nothing and no background was naturally the best. If it was a young lady from a high-ranking official's family, it would only bring harm and no benefit to Su Jingfu. Chu Xiao sat in the middle of the banquet hall with a smile on his face. He looked no different from usual. However, if one looked carefully, one could see that his hands on his knees were so tightly gripped that his knuckles were white. He was almost crumpling his robes. The courtiers watched a good show. Some joked and some congratulated him. The fifth prince was a little puzzled and asked Guang Shua, fourth brother, why did His Majesty bestow a woman dressed as a man to General Feng Yun as his wife? She doesn't look as pretty as Shin Jiejie. The fifth prince liked Xiao Ju very much. Most likely, Xiao Ju's experience was like a legend in the hearts of young boys. Youths yearned for heroes and admired the strong. The fifth prince Guang Ji heard from his birth mother, noble Lady Ni, that Shin Jiejie of the censor Fu was the most compatible person with military governor Xiao. Guang Ji also thought that Shin Muxue was born like a fairy. Now, the person who was bestowed as Xiao Ju's wife was an unfamiliar woman dressed as a man. For Guang Ji, this was unacceptable. "Don't talk nonsense." Guang Shua patted his head and looked at He Yan's back in the hall. Since General Feng Yun is so protective, this Miss He must have something extraordinary about her. Moreover, she was able to enter the battlefield as a woman and become an official. Since the founding of Dewey, this is the first time someone has done so. "What extraordinary about her?" the crown prince said disdainfully. His tone was a little obscene. Who knows what kind of tricks she used. Xiao Huijin is really lucky. A Shin Muxue, and now a female soldier. I don't know what kind of shady business they are doing in the tent every day. Guang Shua frowned slightly. "Your Highness, be careful with your words." The crown prince disagreed. Emperor Wenshuan looked at He Yan again. "He Yan, although you are a woman, I know that you have your difficulties in joining the army as a woman. I am not an unreasonable person. Although you have committed the crime of deceiving me, I will not pursue the matter on account of your meritorious service in the Battle of Jiangrundu. Meritorious service is meritorious service, and mistakes are mistakes. I will punish you with a year's salary, but you will still be bestowed the title of Marquis." "So good." Lin Shuanghe was quick-witted. He slammed the table and shouted first, "Your Majesty is benevolent. Long live your Majesty." He Yan also kowtowed and shouted, "Long live your Majesty." In an instant, a large number of courtiers knelt down and shouted, "Long live your Majesty." Emperor Wenshuan became a wise ruler and thought that he had accomplished a good deed. He was a little smug after being praised and sat on the high seat with a smile. Empress Zhang frowned without batting an eyelid. Noble Lady Ni's probing gaze swept over He Yan. Only concubine Lan sat quietly at the banquet table with a smile, as if everything that happened today had nothing to do with her. He Yan and Xiao Ju returned to their seats. Because she was now a womenfolk, she could only go to the womenfolk's banquet. She did not know any of the womenfolk here. Only Xia Qingxiu waved at her and whispered, "Miss He, come over here." He Yan sat down next to Xia Qingxiu. Xia Qingxiu smiled and said, "Congratulations, Miss He." She smiled and returned the greeting. The Shi too in her heart was finally relieved. At least she could openly appear in De Wei's court under the name He Yan. She had succeeded in her first step. Although she did not know why Xiao Ju was involved and caused such a result, at least for now, there were no negative consequences. Of course, except for the two of them. He Yan's gaze swept across the banquet table. The seats of the womenfolk and womenfolk were facing each other. Her gaze accurately captured Su Zhiheng, who was sitting in the corner and secretly peeping at her. Su Zhiheng was very uneasy. This uneasiness reached its peak when He Yan's identity was revealed. He did not know what was going on. How could a dead person, a person who had been buried, whose corpse might have rotted into mud, appear in front of him again? This woman, who was also called He Yan, did not resemble his deceased wife at all. However, her every movement and expression overlapped with the He Yan in his memory. Especially when he peeped at her, she would also look at him across the crowd. Her meaningful gaze made his heart palpitate. Who exactly was she? Su Zhiheng did not believe in ghosts and gods. Every year, he would pray for blessings and burn incense in the temple. He was the most impatient. When he was young, his teacher always said that one should fear ghosts and gods. However, he always thought that if ghosts and gods really existed in the world, there would not be so many things that could not be done. When they were alive, they could not fight. How could they become fierce after they died? But, He Yan was not killed by him. Su Zhiheng's heart felt cold. He Yan was going to die. This was the ending that the He family had prepared for her. The one who gave the order was He Yuansheng, and the one who did it was He Rufei. He Wanru was an accomplice, and he just did not say anything. Even if the evil ghost came back for revenge, shouldn't the He family be the first to take revenge? Why would they look for him? He gathered his courage and looked at He Yan again. However, he saw that the woman had already turned her head and was talking to Xia Qingxiu. It was as if the gaze just now was just an illusion. Su Zhiheng looked at He Rufei again. They were grasshoppers on the same rope. If He Yan really turned into a ghost and came back, she would definitely not let He Rufei go. As if sensing Su Zhiheng's gaze, He Rufei looked over. He frowned and slightly shook his head at him, indicating that he should not be too obvious. In the imperial court, the two of them always interacted with each other indifferently to avoid being discovered by others. Su Zhiheng was burning with anxiety. However, the banquet was not over yet, so he could not leave without permission. He could only lower his head and continue this long and nauseating celebration banquet, as if he was sitting on pins and needles. Emperor Wenxuan was very happy and drank a lot today. He had been on the throne for many years and did not have much talent in politics. In the first few years, it was okay. He worked hard day and night. Later, he felt that he really did not have any ability and simply became lazy. Although he was not outstanding, he was not an incapable ruler. With the court officials looking after him, nothing major would happen. Until Su Jingfu's power became greater and greater. Many officials secretly reported to him to be wary of Prime Minister Su. Emperor Wenxuan did not know that this was inappropriate. However, he had relied on Su Jingfu for many years. If Su Jingfu was not around, he would not be able to find someone to replace Su Jingfu. Moreover, Su Jingfu's status was not low. If something happened to such an important official, the imperial court would definitely be in turmoil. Although he did not have any talent in politics, he had seen the same thing happen when the previous emperor was alive. However, as long as one was human, they would have their own selfish motives. He turned a blind eye to Su Jingfu's actions. Su Jingfu covered the sky with one hand and affected the interests of many people. Gradually, Emperor Wenxuan knew that behind his back, there were people who called him an incapable ruler. However, they did not know that when the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Governing a country was different. Even as the emperor, there were times when he could not control himself. Xiao Zhongwu's defeat, Yudo's restlessness, the crown prince's tyrannical and immoral behavior, all kinds of messy matters came one after another, giving him a headache. However, tonight, he did something that everyone praised as right. It was not easy. Emperor Wenxuan was happy from the bottom of his heart. Tonight, at a banquet, the two most promising people in the Shuo capital were both bestowed with marriage. Originally, Chu Zhao and Su Pingting's marriage was the Chu family's way out of their league. However, now that Xiao Huijin's marriage was announced, Chu Zhao's marriage was not so surprising anymore. Everyone whispered to each other. Where did He Yan come from? Xiao Zhongwu's eldest son, Xiao Rubi, did not care about the opinions of outsiders and married a concubine's daughter. His youngest son, Xiao Huijin, was even more extreme. No one had even heard of his name. Could it be that his family did not even have an official position? On the other hand, Xiao Zhu was very calm from the beginning to the end. Lin Shuanghe sat beside him. He wanted to immediately pull Xiao Zhu to the side and ask him what was going on. However, under everyone's gaze, it was not good to ask, so he could only suppress his curiosity. Looking at Yan He, he was the same. He was so sullen that he wanted to flip the table. Everyone had their own thoughts during this celebratory banquet. When it ended, the main characters at the banquet all let out a sigh of relief. He Yan stood up. Xia Qingxiu was still a bit worried. Miss He, do you need me to accompany you? She was now being stared at by countless pairs of eyes. Everyone looked at her with calculating gazes. Most ordinary women would not be able to handle it. It's okay. He Yan smiled and thanked her for her kindness. I'll go out by myself. Xia Qingxiu did not insist. Just as he was about to leave, he thought of something and turned to look at Shen Muxue. He saw that Shen Muxue's face was pale and his lips were pale. He was like a stiff puppet, without any signs of life. She paused. In the end, she did not say anything and got up to look for Yan He. The emperor and the other concubines had already left. Yan He pulled Xia Qingxiu and rushed over aggressively. When he saw Lin Shuanghe but did not see Xiao Zhu, he was furious. Where's Xiao Huijin? And that Muan Lang? They lied to me so bitterly. I must get an explanation. Xia Qingxiu pulled him back and seemed to be speechless. He reminded him, Marquis Wuan is a woman. You should watch your words. Have you seen a woman who can chop off several heads with a knife? Yan He shouted, I don't care if they're women or not. Are the two of them playing with me? I'm about to become an idiot. Xia Qingxiu. Be careful. Father is here. What if he hears you? Xia Qingxiu's father, Lord Xia, was looking in their direction. Yan He was shocked. He coughed softly and lowered his voice. His face was still angry. He clenched his fist and asked, where are the two of them? Lin Shuanghe spread his hands. They left. Left? Yan He widened his eyes in disbelief. When? After the emperor left, the two of them left. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. They just got married and will be husband and wife in the future. Why are you, an outsider, interfering? Lin Shuanghe glanced at Xia Qingxiu and said with a smile, could it be that you still haven't given up and want to move Mimi He into your tent? He Yan's identity had been exposed anyway, so he might as well openly call her Mimi He. Yan He was so angry that his face turned green. Don't talk nonsense. He looked at Xia Qingxiu, who was smiling but not speaking, and emphasized in a low voice, I'm not familiar with Muan Lang at all. Then you should go back early. Lin Shuanghe patted his shoulder. On the day of their wedding, I'll definitely invite you to the wedding banquet. Don't worry, don't worry. After he finished speaking, he walked away while humming an off-key tune. In a courtyard somewhere in the palace, weeds were overgrown. It was already autumn, so the flowers and leaves had withered. There was no sign of human habitation here, making it seem even more desolate and lonely. A bright moon shone on the eaves, causing the courtyard to be filled with white frost. The person in front stopped, and the girl behind him stood still. Puzzled, she asked, "Where is this place?" "It's an abandoned side palace," Xiao Ju said. "There are people guarding it, so no one can come in." The palace was huge, and it was He Yan's first time entering the palace, but Xiao Ju wasn't. It was normal for him to know about the secret passages. Seeing that there was no one around, He Yan was slightly relieved. He looked at him and asked, "Commander-in-Chief, what's going on? Why did the Emperor say today that you had already told him my identity?" Xiao Ju said calmly, "Didn't you give Xiao Shiming a letter?" He Yan was shocked. "How did you know?" He didn't answer, but He Yan understood. Xiao Ju had many capable people under his command. Not to mention entering the palace, he probably would have fallen into Xiao Ju's hands before he even entered the palace. "Why did you write a letter behind my back?" Xiao Ju asked. He Yan smiled bitterly. "I always felt that my identity couldn't be hidden for long. Rather than someone revealing it at some point, it's better to prepare myself in advance. Moreover, once the crime of deceiving the Emperor is announced, won't you also be implicated?" Before she left the Rundu, she had asked the county magistrate of the Rundu to deliver a letter to the Emperor. After the battle in the Rundu, the city officials would record the ins and outs of what had happened in a memorial and present it to the Emperor. The letter in the memorial would expose He Yan's identity. However, at the same time that she revealed her identity as a woman, the people of the Rundu signed the letter. He Yan had never met Emperor Wen Xian, but he had always heard from Lin Shuanghe that Emperor Wen Xian was a mediocre and soft-hearted emperor. Sometimes, as long as Su Jingfu didn't fan the flames, he actually had the rare sympathy and compassion of an imperial family. When the late emperor was still alive, a minister made a mistake and the people petitioned. The late emperor was grateful for his past merits and pardoned the minister's death sentence. Emperor Wen Xian worshipped his father the most in his life. He would deliberately imitate the late emperor in many things. Therefore, when Zhao Shiji's petition was presented, Emperor Wen Xian hesitated. What's more, He Yan's contributions were beyond doubt. In the Battle of the Liangzhou Guards, the Battle of Jiang, and the Battle of the Rundu, her merits in each battle were worthy of praise. In comparison, dressing up as a man wasn't a big responsibility. Moreover, she didn't choose to disguise herself as a man. She had no other choice but to join the army by accident. Her merits outweighed her faults. She was a young genius and a woman. The petition from the people would be the last straw that broke the emperor's back. If she wanted to win the hearts of the people, Emperor Wen Xian couldn't order her to be executed. Otherwise, what would the new Liangzhou guards think? What would the people of Jiang think? What would the rescued women in the Rundu think? He Yan thought that he had considered everything and tried his best to convince Xiao Shiji. However, he didn't expect Xiao Ju to interfere at this moment. "I stopped the letter," he said. He Yan stared at him. "Your plan was good, but it wasn't perfect. You might be able to escape unscathed, but you might also lose your life." As long as there was a slight possibility, he wouldn't let He Yan take the risk. "But didn't you also expose my identity?" He Yan didn't understand. "How did you convince His Majesty?" She didn't know that the memorial that Xiao Ju had presented on her behalf had tied the two of them together from the beginning. There was no Fan Cheng or no other choice. Everything was because Xiao Ju had brought He Yan into the army camp for her own selfish desires. If the crime of deceiving the emperor was to be considered, then both of them would be punished. However, with Yudo eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey, Emperor Wen Xian couldn't bear the consequences of not having Xiao Ju guarding De Wei's territory. Therefore, Emperor Wen Xian wouldn't punish them. Even if he did, Xiao Ju would bear the responsibility. Of course, he made this matter a little more soul-stirring. The memorial was as moving as a love story passed down by word of mouth. It easily moved Emperor Wen Xian's romantic and talented heart. After that, he secretly leaked the news to Su Jingfu. When it came to Xiao Ju's marriage, other than the Xiao couple, Su Jingfu was most worried about it. Everyone in Shuajing knew that Shen Muxue was the most likely person to marry Xiao Ju. If the Shen family and Xiao family were to become in-laws, Imperial censor Shen's people would all stand on Xiao Ju's side. This made Su Jingfu very distressed. Even if it wasn't Shen Muxue, Su Jingfu wouldn't be happy if she was the daughter of a court official in Shuajing, as long as it could increase Xiao Ju's power. At this time, He Yan suddenly appeared. Su Jingfu sent people to investigate and found out that she was just the daughter of a military officer at the city gates. He simply thought that this was a good thing that fell from the sky. Therefore, not only did he not stop it, he even tried his best to facilitate the marriage between Xiao Ju and He Yan. For Xiao Ju to marry He Yan, a woman who wouldn't be of any help to his career, Su Jingfu was happy to see it happen. Therefore, there was the scene at the celebration banquet today. Xiao Ju only picked out a few important points. After listening, He Yan was silent for a long time. She never thought that things would turn out this way. Her purpose for writing that letter, other than to get herself out of the possible death sentence, was to not implicate Xiao Ju and draw a clear distance from him. However, she didn't think that she would be involved in a marriage. Although at some point, when he said the words, "sweetheart," she was indeed moved and wished that time would stop. However, she had to wake up from the dream. There were things that she had to do. She couldn't let Xiao Ju be soft-hearted and let him sacrifice his precious life just to protect her. His life should be like the bright moon in the sky, clean, bright, and never mixed with the dark and rotten mud of the ditch. As long as it shone on her, she didn't expect anything more. Governor, He Yan took a deep breath and looked up at him. Actually, you don't have to help me by asking His Majesty to grant you a marriage. It's too unfair for you to try your best to maintain a fake marriage. It's not fake. Xiao Ju interrupted her. He Yan was stunned. What did you say? What was said in the palace is not fake. The young man's voice was gentle. His eyelashes drooped down, and there were faint ripples in his dark eyes. He was unbelievably gentle. In the cold autumn night, the courtyard was deep and the Milky Way was quiet. The slanting moon climbed up the curtain. The night was not as beautiful as a certain someone's eyes. He asked, "Do you like the moon?" He Yan answered blankly. "I like it." The next moment, something warm and cold was stuffed into her hand. He Yan looked down. It was the black jade that was rumored to be the heirloom of the Xiao family, which she had snatched away when she was drunk. It was lying in her palm with a lifelike python. Now, the moon is yours. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.